Followed by the pledge led by Commissioner Joseph Fletcher.
Let's pray. Lord God, we want to thank you for the breath of life you've given each of us. Another day when your beauty and majesty and glory are on clear display. And we are in awe of your creation. And we're in awe of you. And if we're honest, in some ways we're also in fear of you. And yet your word tells us to address you, along with your power and glory, as Father, even as Dad. So, Father, we come to you this morning with respect, but also with some familiarity with you. And we ask you for two things. We ask that you would help each of us accept your offer of mercy and grace and forgiveness. And we also ask that you would help us offer mercy, grace, and forgiveness to others today. Father, we ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. Please join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the greatest nation on earth. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Stan. Under item 4, additions, deletions to the agenda, are there any additions or deletions?
Mr. Chairman, we've had a request to add some additional backup, which is a contract, and it's my understanding that the contract isn't due until the middle of June or so, and I don't think the commissioners nor staff have had the opportunity to review that contract, so I would, at this point, ask that it be not added to the agenda and that it can be placed on next week's agenda where we've had time for staff to look at it and review it.
Okay, is that the 7th contract to item 8I?
That is correct, yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, should we then pull 8I if it's the contract for 8I?
Well, no, there are 7 different contracts,
Okay.
and evidently they didn't have the information for it.
Okay.
Can I call up Louise Hubbard to see if that's true about the June date being when it has to be done?
Yeah.
I know, I just want to make sure she's here.
Ms. Hubbard's in
Morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Louise Hubbard, Executive Director, Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council. There was a special request from HUD this year, given the fact that they're on a continuation budget, to get all of the contracts in by March 1st. I told them that was patently impossible and unreasonable, and that we needed time to bring the contracts, as we've done for almost 9 years, to the Board of Commissioners. They were able to produce for me 6 of the 7 in a timely enough fashion to get it through the procedures. But the 7th one came in yesterday with begging from them, please try to get this done as well. I realize that they all have different start dates, but obviously HUD has its own set of issues to deal with this year and has asked that they all be handled at one time. I had originally requested that in a letter in my original agenda item. However, since it was too difficult for processing, I voluntarily removed that request from the original letter so that it wouldn't be too confusing. And I was hoping, I was kind of surprised that they actually got around to sending that 7th one. These are the same contracts that have been providing $400,000 neighborhood a year since 2003 to Indian River County landlords to house mentally ill, disabled, veterans, people with dialysis, people who die on us regularly. And I just thought it would be easier to just, since they're all new up there, they're all freaking out. They're on a continuing resolution. So when it was suggested to me yesterday that this might be added, it was not my idea, I might add, but I appreciate the assistance. That's the story.
So it's not a deal breaker if we were able to look it over for next week?
next week would be fine. I will beg them. I already tried to get them off.
Okay.
Thank you. I'd appreciate it.
Okay, any other additions or deletions to the agenda?
So,
Chair will entertain a motion to approve as
move to...
not amended?
Well, just move to approve the agenda.
Yeah, as not amended.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Fletcher.
Chairman?
Commissioner Wheeler, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just see this as part of 8I. So I don't know what we're covering. I think staff, because the reading the contract under 8I is identical to the one they want to add. And so anyway, it doesn't make any difference, but I just...
I do agree with you. I mean, looking through it, it's pretty similar to what we've approved in the past, but I don't think it sets good policy.
Okay.
And not only that, our rules state one member's objection stops it on the emergency
That's
items.
true.
So I will respect your opinion. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you. Move on to the minutes. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of January 11th, 2011.
Move approval.
A motion from Commissioner Fletcher, a second from Commissioner Davis. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you. A motion, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the joint meeting with the City of Vero Beach Council meeting of January 11th, 2011.
I'll to do that move.
Second.
And as well as the joint meeting and the regular meeting on the 18th, all three.
And say.
11th.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the joint meeting and the regular meeting of January 18th from Commissioner Davis, a second from Commissioner Fletcher. Any discussion?
That was A, B, and C, right?
Well, we passed A.
We already did A.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Thank you very much. There are a couple informational items, but we'll now move on to the consent agenda. Anybody wish to pull any items?
Like full 8I.
Okay, we'll pull 8I. And
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to pull item 8F.
8F.
and we'll pull 8F. Any others?
Move approval as amended.
Second.
We have a motion from Commissioner Davis to approve as amended, a second from Commissioner, no, I'm sorry, a motion from Commissioner Fletcher, a second from Commissioner Davis. All in favor?
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Item 8F.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the approval for the bid award for the demolition of the Gifford Garden Apartments. And I believe at the last meeting, I think Commissioner Davis, you had a question of the attorney. If the property has changed hands, how would that affect us going forward? So, Alan, could you just give us a summary of where we are on the ownership of Gifford Garden Apartments?
Yes, and actually, I interpreted the question as two-part. If there's a change in ownership, and if the new owner comes in and secures the property, does that change anything from where we are on the demolition path? The answer to the first part is if there was a change in ownership, it would not change anything in terms of our demolition path. The new owner could step in and ask this court, ask this board in its discretion to, to stop the demolition path, but this board would not be legally obligated to do so. And number two, I also felt that even if the new owner had come in and secured the property, that at least the time period within which the owner could stop the demolition process by securing the property had passed. So again, all the new owner could do was come in and say to this board, I have secured the property, I appeal to your discretion to stop the demolition process. But the fact of the matter is, as near as I'm aware, none of those things have happened. We did check the property records as late yesterday afternoon to see if any transfer of ownership was apparent on the public records. And keep in mind, there's a delay between when you hand something to the court and it actually gets available on the public records. But we did not find anything. We have not heard of any change in ownership. I don't know if Mr. Hitchcox is here, but as far as we're aware, there has been no change in ownership and there has been no change in the status of the property. So our view is we are still on the legal path toward demolition.
Okay. Thank you, Alan. Yesterday I met with a gentleman, David Leland, and he had done a lot of work proposing what he said was a plan where he thought he could rehabilitate the buildings, but again, there's no financing lined up, and I think from my point of view, this has been a cancer on society long enough, and so I think we've done everything we can and I'm ready to move forward, so I'll go ahead and make a motion to,
But before you do, Mr. Bryan, I would like to open it up to Mr. Leland to speak, though, since
Okay,
he is
that's
here,
fine.
if he
Yep.
wishes to speak. Mr. Leland, if you'd like to come up, or if anybody else, I'll let anybody who wants to speak on this issue speak on it.
Would an injunction on behalf of the owner filed in the circuit court stop our actions?
Well, if the court were to enter an injunction stopping our action, yes, it would.
Okay.
Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Good morning. David Leland from Riverwind Development here in Vero Beach.
Just wanted to make sure, or give you the opportunity to speak this morning if you wanted to.
I appreciate that. I'll just take a few minutes of your time. I've spent a lot of time with each of you commissioners presenting my case, and I just have a short prepared statement that I'd like to read for one last consideration. I am probably a cross between Martin Luther King and Don Quixote. Dr. King had a dream, and so do I. I believe quality housing can be made affordable and will be appreciated in the Gifford community. With the generosity of a dozen local contractors, I've compiled the cost to reconvert Gifford Gardens into a quality condominium complex that would be sold to area residents with no profits being made by myself or any outside third-party intermediary. The new Gifford Gardens community condominiums, for lack of a better name, would feature all new electrical, all new plumbing, wood laminate carpet flooring, all solid wood kitchens with stainless steel appliances, a 30-foot wading pool and fountain for the children, laundromat, state-of-the-art security, private playground, 24 barbecue and picnic areas, storage lockers for each unit, etc., etc. What I'm requesting the county commissioners to consider is delaying the award and demolition of Gifford Gardens for a period of 30 to 90 days. After talking to nearly a dozen people, contractors and county officials, I believe the majority will admit that Gifford Gardens is structurally sound, but cosmetically it is a blight on the community and needs to be addressed. My suggestion would be to delay any final decision for 30 days to simply get a consensus of the residents of that area to see if they, as taxpayers, would prefer a vacant lot or a community park to a high-end condominium complex with units selling for approximately $35,000. If in 30 days it is determined by the commissioners that there is not adequate support by the local residents for a project like this, then they should move forward with their original plans. If the commissioners feel that there is solid support, then local professionals like Chris Hendricks of Sotheby's International could be asked to assist in locating funding and developing a marketing strategy to convert the stream into a reality. If within the last 60-day period the commissioners feel that inadequate progress is being made, or that the prospect looks bleak, that in good conscience they would need to step in and avoid delaying the inevitable. The patient people of Gifford area have waited a long time to see something improve at this property site. The question is, what would they prefer? What is most cost effective? And then, and whether they or you are open to a 90-day delay before making this decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leland. Anybody else from the audience want to speak on this one? Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
We're going to do this together. Julianne Price, Health Department.
And Deputy Roberta Barker with the Sheriff's Office.
I just have one statement, and that would be for the past year in Gifford. There are 4 different organizations, and they meet monthly, each organization. And quite frequently on the agenda for each of these meetings is the Gifford Garden, the condition of the apartment complex. And it is very clear what the community wants, and that's the demolition.
And yes, I just wanted to reiterate that I started this particular project, I looked it up February 25th of last year. And Mr. Leland's intentions appear to be sincere, But if he had been to the meetings, or he'd been to these meetings, I could understand where he wants to go. But the last minute, this place, I went over there the other day, again, is just getting worse. And I do have a general trespass warning for anybody that goes on the property because of the conditions. And I really feel, and I believe the sheriff's office really feels, that this building, it has to go.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Davis.
No, and I understand, and Mr. Leland, you passed on some very valuable insight and information, and quite frankly, I think that what you're talking about with the with actual ownership versus third-party ownership, that this is that's really what's missing here. And I'm not saying that your plan won't work, but I can tell you it won't work without community buy-in. And when I say that, I mean if you still want to do this, get with these ladies that are here, get with the community. There's time, maybe, but I don't think that I'm ready to stop at this point. And I guess really my question would be just to make sure that that in the event that we were to change our mind, we're not putting ourselves in a situation as far as us being responsible to a demolition firm or asbestos firm in the event that we award it and then perhaps have some, I don't know, divine intervention that changes our mind.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Fletcher.
And I enjoyed the opportunity to speak with Mr. Leyland yesterday, and I believe that his quest, his thought process is extremely noble, and it's well thought out with the lack of funding. And that was the issue that we discussed, not being an engineer, but I've, over the past 10 years prior to being elected, I've had the opportunity to respond to that building and watched it go through the past 3 failed attempts and the trials and tribulations of deterioration. I believe that the sheriff has accompanied us, and Julianne, we've had many walkthroughs, and I believe that Mr. Leyland is missing a few points of what is actually there in the building. Again, our buildings representative, Jose, had clearly stated that it's more far gone than had been estimated or is obvious, and most certainly when talking with Mr. Leyland, he said he had been through the majority of the buildings and where there was not evidence of mold and mildew, and I beg to differ. I see a lot more deterioration and public health hazard existing in the building, besides being an incubator for crime. And I believe that it's time, and I don't believe that $1 million or $2 million is going to bring this building back with stainless steel sinks and oak cabinets and a pool. Again, it's a great vision, and I commend Mr. Leyland for approaching us and discussing it. It was a well-thought-out idea with the lack of funding, though. And I don't believe it can be accomplished, and I think that this blight has to be addressed as soon as possible.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, a couple of questions, legal. If we accept this bid today, I don't know how long it would be before they could go in there and start demolition. The amount of vendors that applied, I would think probably pretty quick. My question would be, and I basically agree with partially with Commissioner Fleischer, and also I think it is a noble idea. I think that what he wants to do is good. He's also, from talking to him yesterday, as he talked to you gentlemen too, I'm sure, has had experience with doing projects like this, which gives him some credibility. A lot of things in Gifford that are there today, for instance, the community center, the pool, etc., there wasn't funding for, but they found funding. There's very generous people in this community taking interest. And I don't know, I wouldn't be opposed unless either legal or somebody can tell me, give me a good reason why we shouldn't look at the possibility of saving, a couple $100,000 on what we're going on the hook for to clean it up. Item one. 2, 30 days would give him, Mr. Leland, an ability to go to these 4 meetings and present his case and see if there is community support. And in 30 days or whatever, we come back and address it here and decide whether you want to go another 60 days or not. He'd have some idea of the direction he's going. I think his vision, I think what he wants to do is good. I think it would be great. And one of the things that really is appealing to me is home ownership. And that's better than subsidized rental units. And I think that people take more pride. So I would be in favor of, unless somebody can give me some reasons why we shouldn't, but right now what I'm looking at is doing this in two sets. One, a 30-day set, as he requested, to have him talk to the 4 community organizations, see if there's community support for it. And then secondly, if there is community support for it, he should have some better handle on where he's going financially or who's supporting this and so on and so forth, and come back in 30 days and say there is support or there isn't support and move forward from that point. I just think, it's been a year. I don't think another 30 days is going to kill anything or change anything. I think it's a logical approach to try and solve a problem.
Mr. Chairman, or actually go ahead. Alan, I think, was going to add something.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I could just make a couple of points. Number one, the bids are required to remain open for 60 days. They were submitted on February 18, so they are required to stay open through roughly April 19. So if you wanted to delay awarding the bid or making the award, you have some time to do that. I would certainly not recommend that you make the award today with the thought that you'll pull it back sometime in the future, because you clearly will run the risk of some liability by doing that. So I think those were just the 2 points I wanted to make.
Commissioner Davis.
Mr. Pluckowitz, can you explain to me the April date again that you just said it needs to stay open?
Yes. When the bid documents were put out, within the bid documents there is a requirement that anybody who submits a bid shall keep that bid open and available for acceptance, for lack of a better word, for 60 days. It is irrevocable for 60 days. Okay. So based on the bid documents, these bids that you have in front of us are irrevocable until 60 days from February 18, which, as I say, I believe brings us to April 19. So within that time period, if you were to delay awarding the bid until, pick a date, April 12, those bids are still required to be
honorable,
open at that point and able to be accepted.
Officer Barker.
Yes, Deputy Roberta Barker again from the Sheriff's Office. Commissioner Wheeler, I understand, and again, what Mr. Leland is trying to do is wonderful. I guess what I'm up here trying to say is I started this project February 2010, and since then, even though it was in bad condition then, since then it just has gotten worse, deteriorated to no end. I think the trespass warning that I put on there has helped to keep people off of it. But we're not only here to protect the citizens of the county, we're also here at the Sheriff's Office to protect our own. And that building, whether Mr. Leland can put a fence, because Mr. Hitchcock tried, even though he put the fence up illegally, he had the fence there, and the very night people cut holes in it and went through it. This building is so bad. I just feel that putting a delay on it is just going to get worse. And I just wanted to say that because I've watched it progress, as well as Commissioner Flesher over the years, over 20 years on this department. I've watched it go from hand to hand. I've watched it deteriorate. And even, like I say, in the year that I started this project, it has gotten terrible. And I really feel that we need to do the best we can to push this through.
I understand that. I from sitting at the meetings here when this has come up several times in the last few months, I think the path of least resistance would be to go ahead, approve the bid, move forward, and dispose of it. But Mr. Leland, from talking to him yesterday, and he also gave a proposal or an outline, I guess, that what he wanted to do, and he has credibility from the standpoint that he's been involved in projects like this before. It would save the county some money. It would end up with a nice project if it's successful for home ownership for individuals in the community that could afford to live there. I see some upsides to this, and I know it's been a year, and I agree. I'd like to see it demolished. And in talking to him yesterday, I basically told him that. But I read through his stuff again, and I've given it some consideration, and I don't see where it's been 12 months. I don't think another 30 days is going to be a disaster in just seeing if there's some potential. I like to see people come forward and get involved in the community, and so I just don't see the 30-day extension or looking at it in 30 days and see where we're at, and I see it as being it may even be slight, but there's a possibility that this could work, and for 30 days, we're adding 1/12 more time to it, and I agree. I think everybody wants to get rid of that, but I'm just in favor of giving it a shot and see what we can do.
On this one, I'm actually going to fall down with Commissioner O'Brien and Officer Barker. I've been there a number of times. It is, as has been said, a cancer on the community. It's not been going on for 1 year. It's been going on more like 20 years. This isn't the first cycle of someone trying to come and renovate it and it falling apart. It's about the third or fourth cycle. One of the standards I've always used, I used to have a number of rentals, and one of the standards I always use for a decent place to live is, if something happened financially to my wife and I, would I live there? And forget Gifford Gardens. The Gifford Gardens is so bad that I wouldn't live in any of the houses around there. I wouldn't even feel safe leaving my wife in any of those houses around there. And those people who live in that neighborhood have had to bear that for so long that I think any delay at this point is intolerable. I think Mr. Leland's ideas are great, but the fact of the matter is there are plenty of opportunities to put what he has in mind in the Gifford community besides Gifford Gardens. And I think that this commission really needs to make a statement to the community that we understand that this is wrong, that this is not an acceptable structure in our community, and that we actually should have had it torn down yesterday, if not before that. So at this point, I think any delay is intolerable and unconscionable, and we'll certainly be supporting a motion which moves this forward as fast as possible. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, yes. In crime prevention, we use the term a broken window. And most certainly, Gifford Gardens is not a broken window. It's a shattered window. And I believe that any superficial treatment would be just that, and then it would go back to what it was in a downward spiral. And again, I asked the other commissioners if I know you have, Mr. Chairman, but how many of us have visited the building? I know I've had the opportunity and the demand to, being called out for service, but more recently, going there out of interest and hearing from the community. The members of the community have spoken. I don't believe that attending the 4 meetings is going to sway any one of the individuals in attendance. If any of us have attended those meetings, which I have, the message is loud and clear. They're concerned. It's a health and safety and a health welfare issue. People are concerned as to what's going on there and what has gone on there so long, and that the caustic activity is impregnated throughout the walls. It's not just we can clean it up, we can paint it up, and we'll sell it. I think a whole lot has to be done there, and I just think it's unconscionable to delay this action, although, again, a commendable thought, as I agree with Mr. Leland on his process, but I believe maybe another project is in that thought process, and maybe not this one. I think this one's just too far gone.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Davis.
This is tough. In looking at the business plan that was presented, the main difference in what I looked at yesterday versus the facility that's there is clearly the home ownership side of it. And not looking at it as a habitat model for home ownership. To me, that is what is truly missing in the project. Now, let's go ahead and assume that we move forward with the demolition. The impact fees associated with the residential unit is still going to be with the property. So therefore, that many units times $7,000, just assume that on the square footage, for school impact fees, traffic impact fees, fire, go through all 7 of them, is going to be there. So there's going to be value still with the property. Whenever that happens, somebody's going to come in and they're going to purchase this property, and then the possibilities, because it's still zoned for this use of this designation, you're going to look at something just like this, I'm thinking, maybe newer. The problem with that is if they do something other than ownership, 20 years from now, this community could be looking at something very similar to what it has today. I'm kind of the opinion, if we have the opportunity to do something about it now versus having the community worry about it 20 years from now, that 30 days may actually make this a game changer for the community. I really do appreciate the meetings, and I really do not think that this will work without the community support, because it is such a volatile issue. And in reality, I don't believe, quite frankly, that you're going to be able to get this worked out so that it can be rehabilitated. The deck's stacked against you. However, in light of where we are in the process, I would be willing to grant a 30-day extension.
Okay, Commissioner Davis, 2 things. One is, I don't believe that you can replace it with the same number of units on there. I believe there are 55 units on there today, and somewhere around 33 units would be possible in the future. The second thing is, if this were an idea that the community might want to embrace, I would have expected someone from the community to have come up and spoken in favor of it by now. One second. And nobody's come forward. I mean, there's the Gifford community was well aware of Mr. Leland's and Mr. Hitchcock's attempts, and no one from the community has come forward to say, you know, this is a great idea. I think our community will be strengthened if we go forward with this act. And again, there are plenty of other opportunities in the community for it, for Mr. Leland or others like him to be engaged in. But to come and stop this one at the last moment, I obviously think is not the right thing. Commissioner,
can I just respond?
Okay, well, let Commissioner Davis respond.
Well, and the number of units, in the event it gets torn down, I mean, is the number of units that's allowed in the zoning. What I'm talking about is the credit, the dollars that are actually associated with each unit. Does not go away just because you have 33 units. So in fact, you jump it up to a bigger size footprint. I'm not sure, what are they, I think they're less than 1,000 square feet per unit. I mean, once you move it up to a 1,500 square foot, then you go into a different threshold for the impact fees, and so therefore the value is still there. And to me, the value of ownership versus a subsidized housing or the opportunity for somebody to be a slumlord is where the scourge is. And I think that that's what we've had, and I think that if we're not careful, that's what we'll have in the future with a business plan after we demolish this structure.
Thank you. Commissioner Wheeler.
Just to summarize, you know, we've got until April 15th, and these bids are still available. I don't see 30 days adding a tremendous burden to what's been done so far. I don't think 30 days is a maker or breaker. But for that 30 days, we have the possibility, according to the numbers here, to save about $150,000 of taxpayers' money, and take a further look at this to see if it's doable. And even though, obviously, by some opinion here, and possibly even my own, it's a long shot, but for a 30-day extension to evaluate, let the community look at it, speak with Mr. Leland, and save potentially $150,000, create home ownership in a nice area, and you talk about neighborhoods and not allowing your wife to stay there. I can tell you that I've seen neighborhoods deteriorate over years, and I've seen neighborhoods that had deteriorated be rebuilt, and you put something nice in a neighborhood, and like Commissioner Flesher and the broken window syndrome, you know, you fix the windows and fix it up and stuff, and it tends to turn in the other direction on neighborhoods. So I think 30 days is very, very little time to give to see if we can save $150,000, to see if this can be created. And I talked to Mr. Leland yesterday, and I said, if you see going forward with this, that there's anything in the road that looks like it may block you, he said I would withdraw immediately and let you know. So, he's on board with this. He understands the problem, and I just don't see 30 days being a buster here for the potential, the upside potential. I think it's a good wait for 30 days rather than just taking the path of least resistance, saying it's been 12 months, it's been a year, let's go ahead and go through with it. So, and it's $150,000. We could potentially save that. We got tough budget time. So.
Just a couple points. One is that the bids actually came in a lot lower than expected. It's $80,000, not $150,000.
Well, that's what it says here.
No, my backup says $79,920.
Well, we're looking at asbestos also.
That's both of them. Total amount, $79,920.
I'll staff it in.
You're correct. I added the $79,000 in.
Okay. Secondly, I don't know, maybe Bob Keating can correct me, but I remember when the current owner, the MBM or MMB, whoever they are, Michael Hooker, it was in the paper when he bought the apartment buildings. There was a big thing in the paper because he was going to buy them as apartments and convert them to condos and sell them. And I don't know if he ever did that conversion or not, but apparently that business model of condos and selling them for home ownership fell apart because it didn't happen today. So I don't think that it's going to happen again now. Secondly, I remember the first year or two on the board, we had a structure off 58th Avenue that was scheduled for demolition, and we gave the owner 30 days after 30 days after 30 days after 30 days. Nothing ever got done. We finally went ahead and demolished it. I see the same thing here. Nothing against Mr. Leland, but one, he doesn't own the property. So, the whole ownership question is still in doubt. And Mr. Hitchcock was here last week. He swore by today he would have a deed, and apparently he's not here. So the ownership hasn't even been settled, so I don't think that's getting taken care of within 30 days. And second, the financing. Mr. Leland has presented a very good plan. I appreciate greatly the time and effort he put into it, but there's no money to back it. So I think we're ready to move forward. I don't think 30 days is going to get us anywhere other than in 30 days we're going to hear another story. Well, I've talked to some people. We're getting close. We need 30 more days, and this thing just dragging on. So with that, I'll go ahead and make a recommendation that we accept the bid awards for the demolition and for the asbestos abatement removal.
Second. We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Fletcher, Commissioner Davis.
Yeah, and I can truly say, I think we can count to 3. I'm not disappointed that, in fact, that it is moving forward. But I'm not going to support the motion because I just what Commissioner O'Brien said about what happened with the business model. The business model has clearly changed as far as the level of entry for the value of the property that can take place in today's market. And so I think that things have changed from that standpoint as far as the business model. And
at 35,000, and I think there's 62 units, that's only $2 million, which may not cover the reconstruction costs. So I'm not sure if these prices are good, if the business model is really going to work.
No, I understand that. I'm talking about just the level of the barrier of entry for the facility.
And in this economy, I don't know if the level of commitment is going to be as strong as it was then when it failed. That's my concern as well.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to ask Peter clarification. The other project you were talking, was it the one down in the Highlands, or was it something other?
No, it's this.
No, when you said that it extended and extended.
Oh, no, it was on 58th Avenue and like 5th Street Southwest. It was an old nursery.
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Yeah.
Damaged by the hurricane. I forget the owner's name, but it came back.
We went through that about a year.
As Wesley said, I think we can count to 3, but we'll let this gentleman speak, and then I think we'll call the question.
All right, hello, I'm Timothy Conn with TC Enterprise. I also did a walkthrough with Mr. Leland regarding the property. Regarding the mold issue, sorry, but I'm mold certified, and on the property there's 3 walls that have mold on the surface. Mold can't go through concrete. It is savable, and we can redo the whole property for under $35,000 a unit, from 30 to 35. I've done some research, I've done electrical research, I've got prices from electrical, plumbing, everybody, and it is definitely doable. And again, whoever told you there's mold all throughout, there's not. The windows are blown out, repairable. The outside air and inside air is the same. We can get it all tested, and we can get it post-tested after we're done to prove that there is no harmful mold in the place. So it is definitely doable for under $35,000 a unit. With everything else, with the pool and outside paint, new interior, it's all structurally sound. So, I mean, it is doable for around 30, no more than 35. So, that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Okay, is everybody about ready for the vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
The vote passes 3-2. Commissioners Davis and Wheeler dissenting. Thank you very much. Commissioner Wheeler pulled 8I. Page 74 on the agenda.
Yes. The other item that was to be added and wasn't added, it's the same contract. And before we vote on this, I would ask that, and I've already talked to Alan, if he would read this contract. It's 2 pages long, and I would like to see and be sure that everybody realizes, you know, what's happening here with federal money. And so with that, I would request that Alan, as our lawyer, read through this legal contract.
I understand you want me to read this out loud.
Yes.
And starting with that section on page 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I have some hot chocolate and snuggle a little blanket before you read to me, please?
Let's do s'mores.
What page are you starting from, Alan?
Page 2.
What page in the agenda?
On the added, it's the same contract that's in there. The contract is, I think, identical.
What is he reading from?
I have multiple pages.
On this one. The one that was to be added, I think, is the one he's got, or it would start.
Okay.
You can take a look at your board package at 87.
Yeah.
Same contract, same
Same thing. It's
Board
identical.
package 87.
And keep in mind, as he reads this, and the point of asking him to do that is for the public, too, to realize what hoops you got to go through to get this federal money, that's our money, that's been sent to Washington, and they send it back. So that's my point. I'd like the public to understand that.
Okay. It starts, recipient agrees to conduct an ongoing assessment, and the recipient is the county. Recipient agrees to conduct an ongoing assessment of the rental assistance and supportive services required by the participants in the program. To assure the adequate provisions of supportive services to the participants in the program, to be responsible for overall administration of this grant, including overseeing any subrecipients, contractors, and subcontractors, and to comply with such other terms and conditions, including record-keeping and reports, which must include racial and ethnic data on participants for program monitoring and evaluation purposes, as the Secretary may establish for purposes of carrying out the program in an effective and efficient manner. The recipient and project sponsor, if any, will not knowingly allow illegal activities in any unit assisted with S+C funds. Recipient agrees to draw grant funds for and to make rental assistance payments on behalf of eligible program participants at least quarterly. A default shall consist of any use of grant funds for a purpose other than as authorized by this agreement. Non-compliance with the Act, rule, any material breach of the agreement, failure to expend grant funds in a timely manner, or representations in the application submissions that, if known by HUD, would have resulted in a grant not being provided. Upon due notice to the recipient of the occurrence of such default and the provision of a reasonable opportunity to respond, HUD may take one or more of the following actions. A, direct the recipient to submit progress schedules for completing approved activities. B, issue a letter of warning advising the recipient of the default, establishing a date by which corrective actions must be completed, and putting the recipient on notice that more serious actions will be taken if the default is not corrected or repeated. C, direct recipient to establish and maintain a management plan that assigns responsibility for carrying out remedial actions. D, direct the recipient to suspend, discontinue, or not incur costs for the affected activity. E, reduce or recapture the grant. F, direct the recipient to reimburse the program accounts for costs inappropriately charged to the program. G, continue the grant with a substitute recipient selected by HUD. H, other appropriate action, including but not limited to any remedial action legally available, such as affirmative litigation seeking declaratory judgment, specific performance, damages, temporary or permanent injunctions, and any other available remedies. No delay or omissions by HUD in exercising any right or remedy available to it under the agreement shall impair any such right or remedy or constitute a waiver or acquiescence in any recipient default. The grantee shall comply with requirements established by the Office of Management and Budget concerning the Dun & Bradstreet Data Universal Numbering System, the Central Contractor Registration Database, and the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, including Appendix A to Part 25 of the Financial Assistance Use of Universal Identifier and Central Contractor Registration, 75 Federal Register 55671, September 14, 2010, to be at 2 CFR Part 25, and Appendix A to Part 170 of Requirements for Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act Implementation, 75 Federal Register 55663, September 14, 2010, to be codified at 2 CFR Part 170. Let me keep going.
Could you repeat that? Okay. So it's a basic contract.
You have a good idea of what I meant by bureaucraties.
Orwellian.
Well, and that's my point. And administrative fees, the amount of people it takes to draw this contract up, have it read, signed, flip it back and forth to Washington, D.C. to get the, quote, free money that doesn't exist, because it's not free. It's taxpayers' money from local communities all over the country. We send it to Washington, D.C., and then they send us this, telling us everything you got to do to get your money back, and it keeps us on the hook. We keep wanting money. We keep saying to the government, cut expenses, and we keep asking for more and more. And the thing here that really concerns me is that there's no delay. They can come back years later and say, you know, we found something. You owe us the money. In fact, I don't know where we are now, Alan. The federal grant we got to do the sewer system.
Rockridge.
Down in Rockledge. Where are we on that? I mean, we completed the whole thing. We jumped through all the hoops, and they come back a couple years later and say, hey, we want our money back. We made a mistake. We didn't make the mistake. They did, but they want their money back.
Yeah, we responded back to that saying essentially, no, we did not make a mistake, and you're not entitled to take the money away from us. And I'm not sure, they have not responded as of today. Is that correct? Yeah. We have not heard back from FEMA today.
So, at any rate, I got the same position on this and probably will in the future with a few rare exceptions. But, you know, I'm just, to me, it's just out of hand with what government's doing. And then we wonder why government's so inefficient. And look at the contract.
I agree. And if we want to start.
Well, actually, staff pointed this out about probably 14 years ago when you created the Treasure Coast Homeless Services Council. Indian River County is what we call the host county and responsible for the whole Treasure Coast. So staff pointed this out, the liability that was going to occur when we created this animal 12 years ago, and didn't recommend it.
Well, I'll make a motion that we not accept the grant.
Well, we have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien. Do we have a second?
That's Commissioner Wheeler.
Excuse me, Commissioner. My apologies.
Yep.
We have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler. Do we have a second? Motion fails for lack of a second. Chair will take the motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve staff recommendation to approve the 6.
We have a motion from Commissioner O'Brien, a second from Commissioner Fletcher. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes 4-1. Commissioner Wheeler dissenting. Thank you very much. My apologies again.
Yeah, please don't
I
let that
promise not to do it again. If I do, you can hit me.
You're welcome.
We now move on to public items.
1.5.
A public hearing for the amendment to section 100.34, paragraph 4 of the Code of Indian River County, codifying and publishing the ordinances to readopt the code up to and including supplement 84. I'll talk about bureaucraties. We're almost there ourselves. I'll pass this to Mr. Polakwich.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I actually just noticed on the agenda there is a misprint where it reads section 100.034, paren 4, that it should actually be 100.03, paren 4. So there's an extra 4 in there. But basically, throughout the year, you adopt various ordinances. State law requires that annually you then, at the end of that process, codify and publish your ordinances in some manner so the public can have the code available to it. So this is the annual time that we're coming forward asking the board to adopt an ordinance updating their code through supplement, I think it was 84. Yes, it's through supplement 84. Because it is an ordinance that we would be adopting today, a public hearing is required.
Thank you. I will now open the public hearing to see if anybody would like to speak on this issue. Does anybody from the public want to come forward and speak? There being no one from the public to speak, we'll now close the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, should we have the attorney read ordinances 1 through 84?
I've got a life, Commissioner O'Brien, so I'm going to pass on that one, but I'm sure you've all read the entire thing prior to this meeting, so the public can feel comfortable with that. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I move staff recommendation to adopt and codify the ordinances up to and including supplement 84.
A motion from Commissioner O'Brien. I'll second it. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you. Public discussion. We now have public discussion from Mr. Glenn Herron and Dr. Stephen Faraday regarding regionalization of water, sewer, irrigation in the county, the city of Vero Beach, and the town of Indian River Shores. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. We're going to make a presentation on water, sewer, irrigation. We'll be referring to WSI. It's just the acronym. Why are we making this presentation? It seems like progress on water, sewer, irrigation is stalled. In October of 2008, the county took the initiative and established a tri-jurisdiction commission to look at these particular issues. Subsequently, there was a contract let with GAI, which led to a conflict, allegations of conflict of interest and termination of the contract. The committee was disbanded. We also had difficulties with regard to the county getting authorization from the city for the county to engage in discussions with the shores. Subsequently, there were allegations made that the county's water and sewer system was underfunded by $11 million. Presentation by Commissioner Solari, by Finance Director Brown, and Utility Director Olson indicated that there's more than $60 million cash reserves. So that's been answered. Even the City Council has had difficulty getting financial statements from its own finance department. Glenn has been able to piece together the finances and compare between the county and the city. The city's finances are bad. Regionalization is really the answer. What we're going to present is some of the assumptions we used in constructing this model. One is that the county board needs to notify the city that it intends to withdraw the county customers of the city for water, sewer, and irrigation. Remember that there is a 5-year advance notice required. The city and the county should merge the reuse water systems in 2011 for the benefit of the shores, the city, and the county. That's a real critical issue for purposes of the shores. Also, the city and shores should divide their infrastructure as is prescribed in 2016, where essentially the shores gets the city water, sewer, irrigation infrastructure, but divide it now and proceed on with the discussions. In exchange for the county taking over all of the city's WSI debt and employee liabilities, the city transfers its 2016 WSI infrastructure to the county, includes all assets and liabilities. In exchange for the shores participating in this regionalization, it gets the consolidated WSI, lower rates, and it does not have to build an infrastructure, and it transfers its 2016 assets, which are partially from the city, to the county. The city and shores entered into a 30-year water and sewer franchise agreement with the county in 2011, with or without a buyback for them. The county doesn't increase its WSI rates for the next 10 years. Based upon the discussions, it doesn't seem like that would be necessary. Current county rates decreased 2% for all customers under regionalization. That would be for the shores, the county, and the city customers. City customers would be required to pay an additional 5% deferred maintenance adjustment. Back in June of 2010, the city decided it would not proceed with the increases that were needed and recommended by its consultant in an $80,000 study 9 months before. Those increases will create a $13 million liability for the city at the end of 2014. It also has achieved these reductions by deferring capital expenses beyond 2014, which is the 5-year window for its capital program. So therefore, they would have an initial charge of 5% for 5 years for unanticipated problems that arise as a result of deferred maintenance. The Shores would have the same thing, since they would be acquiring city infrastructure property. The city would remove the Riverside plant and use the land as it sees fit. It would have to be negotiated for who pays for removal, but also the city would then connect to the county's water sewer irrigation system at the old post office site. All new building impact fees are paid to the county after the franchise agreements, and current deposited amounts are accounted for and transferred to the county from the Shores and the city. The county would provide consolidated water and sewer operations, customer service, emergency response. All customers would then have the ability to vote for those running the county water, sewer, and irrigation system, which is the county board. 44% of the city's water and sewer customers do not have the opportunity to vote for the city council because they are outside the municipal limits.
Hit your button. Right there at the base of the microphone.
Glenn Herron, if I might add to Steve's comment there, this allows for perfect representation in this county water regionalized system. We would get rid of the concept that I'm a city resident, or I'm a Shores resident, or I'm a county resident. This is perfect representation. We all have an equal vote in a utility run by this board.
As mentioned previously, the city had a study done August 19th, 2009. It cost them $80,000. It was the first time that a rate and service study had been done in 19 years. 9 months later, June 15th, 2010, the city eliminated, prior to the elections, the rate increases that had been scheduled.
Dr. Fair, can I interrupt you for a minute because I might forget this? There was $80,000 that the city taxpayers paid to an outside consultant.
Correct.
But I've seen the rate rationalization that Mr. Herron's done, and he has done an excellent job on this and has done it for free, and we've got a result which is certainly equal to the $80,000 result that the city of Vero Beach gotten. So I think that every taxpayer in the county needs to understand that what Mr. Herron has done is of tremendous value to the taxpayers, and as a couple, Dr. Faraday and Mr. Herron have saved the taxpayers at least $80,000. Personally, I think that the result that we got from Mr. Herron is better than the result that the city got, though the city's result was good. But so, I mean, I'd be happy to put the value to the county residents as well over $100,000. So thank you very much, and
thank you, gentlemen.
The work.
Thank you. On the next page, a summary bill comparison. This is straight from PRMG, which was a consultant. If you notice the boxed area, that's for 6,000 gallons. The existing rate as of that time was $50.59, and by the end of 2014 would increase to $77.43, which was a 53% increase. That's what the city needed to do to increase the rates to have a financially viable WSI infrastructure. It should be mentioned too, right now I'm a South Beach resident. I pay 67% more than a county resident for water. Why should I? If the city had not eliminated the rates, I would be paying 172% more than a county resident. That's unbelievable. I do not believe that the rates should have been eliminated. They should have continued if you are truly going to run the WSI operation in the city as a business. It's also important to note on this particular chart, if you look at the third item in from the left, that is the county's rates. If you then go to the sixth one in, that's the proposed city rates for 2009, another 2 ones for 2010. You see it tracking all the way through until it gets to nearly the 6th or 7th column from the right, and that's 77.43. Those are the increases that need to be scheduled for the city to incur or to be able to run that as a viable financial operation. The conclusion of the consultant was the city's existing rates are not sufficient to fund the net revenue requirements of the water and wastewater systems. If that's the case, then why did they defer capital improvements, and why did they reduce or eliminate the increases that were scheduled?
Can I ask a question? If you back up to that chart.
Yes.
I'm just curious. I'm looking, it said 6,000 gallons a month.
Yes.
I know in the county, generally, we work off about 3,000 gallons a month. What's the average use? Is it 6,000?
6,000 for the city. It should be mentioned too, the 5/8-inch meter, about 60% of the county customers, or excuse me, the city customers have got 5/8-inch meters. If you add in 3/4-inch meters, it brings it up to around 80%. For those people in the shores and the county, generally they are above 1-inch meters. I've got a 1.5-inch meter, so the costs are incrementally higher.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wheeler, the 6,000 gallons is pretty much average for the system, and 5/8 is considered the average meter. What Steve was mentioning about these larger meters, the county doesn't do it this way. The county does not charge additional charges for having a larger meter. They base it on ERUs. The city does, and so when Steve's mentioning that he has an 1.5-inch meter at his house, we'll show that at the end of the presentation, that the rates are staggering. And it doesn't get a lot of mention. It didn't get a lot of mention by PRMG. They just focused on their 5/8-inch meter, which is the city's most competitive meter. But don't forget about 40% of the other meters out there that are even higher priced.
Thank you.
If you notice on the bottom left-hand side, it shows 22. That's the page number from the report. It's a significantly long report that was generated, so we tried to condense just a few portions of it. Glenn's done a magnificent job, as Commissioner Solari mentioned, on the financial health and the comparisons, et cetera. So Glenn will take over now.
Just the hierarchy. Good morning, Commissioners. I wanted to take this moment to commend Commissioner Solari on the correct pronunciation of my name. I know he's been struggling over these years, and I just wanted to make that public. So
it's
you're doing a great job.
Actually taken me 2 years to get it right, and then if I fall back and say it incorrectly in the future, please apologize, and I apologize in advance. And
outstanding
we'll
job.
do my best to pronounce it correctly. For the audience, that is Heron.
Heron, that is correct.
I was going to say, how hard is Glenn?
All right. In all seriousness, this is a very exciting. I'm pretty excited about this presentation. It's what I do, numbers. So one of the things that Steve and I have been accused of in the past is that we don't present real numbers. That everything we do with these models are made up out of the top of our heads. Well, that's just simply not the case. This is the Indian River County's balance sheet based on their CAFRs. They're real numbers. And I would certainly invite Mr. Barrett and Mr. Brown to comment as we go through this. This is the last 4 years. Take a look at the health of Indian River County utility. This is a very, very strong utility. What I draw your attention to is cash and investments. It's gone down over the last few years, but that's because you've been building a lot of infrastructure. But you've been doing it with cash. You haven't been doing it with debt. So the last column is 09-010, $60 million in cash, and take a look at your debt, $61 million. Without regard to what's restricted or unrestricted, you could literally pay off 98% of your debt with cash. That's pretty impressive. Take a look also at the fact that your debt over the last 4 years has been going down. I mean, you're paying off your debt, and it's tremendous financial condition. Take a look at the last column. I've got it in blue, the last row in blue, net assets. I've taken out plant, property, and equipment. I consider that a public asset, much like a road. It's not as if you're going to sell it. I don't think you guys are going to be privatizing the utility anytime soon. So take that out of the equation. Take a look at your cash, and it's basically your net assets less your plant, property, and equipment. You're in the black. This is a good thing. I mean, and you're always in the black. This isn't something new. This isn't something you've done just this last year. This is the last 4 years. Let's go to the city and take a look at that. Again, this is based on their CAFRs. These are real numbers. The last column, we just got a preliminary audit report from the city, so we're working with that. But let's take a look at them. Again, same thing. I'll draw your attention to their cash. Their cash has gone down in the last few years, with the exception of last year. They were able to raise about $2 million in cash and investments. Last year, in fact, they had no cash as of year end of 2009. No cash. They had some restricted cash of $1 million, but unrestricted cash, nothing. Investments, nothing. Take a look at their debt. This is pretty telling. Their debt has gone up every year, and now they have $27 million in debt. Super, they collected $2 million in cash. Their debt jumped $10 million in 1 year. Take a look at how much they could pay off with their cash. 25% 4 years ago, then 15, then 6, now they're back up to 12. This is an unhealthy system. Take the same analysis where we showed the plant, property, and equipment subtracted, and they're negative. They're in the hole, they're in the red every year. This isn't something new, and it's getting worse and worse as time goes by. They've gone from 9 million in the hole to 20 million in the hole. Not a healthy utility. Go ahead. Side-by-side comparison just showing the last year. County utilities pay off 90% of its debt with cash. The city, 12. Net assets, 10 million in the black for the county, and the city is 20 million in the hole. This is horrible. I mean, this is a dangerous situation for the city to be in. This is why Steve mentioned, as PRMG mentioned, that rate increases are inevitable. You can't just wave your magic wand and suggest that the city can move its capital projects off in the future. They are coming. Go ahead. The next section is a little bit more theoretical. And what I want to talk about is rate sufficiency. And this is something PRMG also talked about. These are things that have to be included in your rates every single year in order for your system to work. First, you have to collect annual operating costs. That would be your personnel and your maintenance of your operating costs, your supplies, your chemicals. Every year you have to collect that, obviously. You also have to collect routine capital replacement and renewal. Things that don't improve that just maintain the life of the asset. We're not increasing the life of the asset, we're just keeping the asset going. You also have to collect bond interest and bond principal. You also have to collect a 5%, we would consider a 5% reserve for major capital improvements. As buildings become dilapidated, you have to restore them. And a 5% regulatory risk. This is the risk that St. John's Water Management District would come in and suggest, hey, you need to do more to clean up the lagoon, or you've got these issues coming at you. You can't ignore that. And that's something that in my discussions with Commissioner Solari, he actually is fairly well versed on. So these are the 6 items that you really have to collect. Now, let's go to the next column, the next section. This is using the CAFRs, applying that theory to Indian River County to see if its rates have been sufficient over the last 4 years. We take a look at their inflows, which is their charges for service. That's it's about, you look at it, it's the first line, 27 million, and it varies from 27 to 25 from year to year. That's the rates that the customers of this utility pay. Some other income, add to that. And then, of course, take out all of these expenses that we just mentioned. The operating costs, renewal and replacement, interest, principal payment, and the reserves for major capital and regulatory risk. The green number is what I want you to look at. In 2006, you would have made $4 million. Rates are clearly sufficient. The next year you lost a little money, but over the average of those 2 years, you still made money. 2008, 2009, you made another $1 million. 2009, 2010, you made $3 million. Your rates are sufficient. There's absolutely no question about it. You cannot, there's been some discussion by the city of Vero Beach that you're losing $11 million a year. Not in your wildest dreams are you losing $11 million a year. Your rates are sufficient.
May I ask a question?
Me too, for you.
Commissioner Wheeler?
I know with ours, enterprise fund, none of this money comes back into our general fund. I'm curious as to the city, because I know with the electric plant, it comes back into the general fund. Do any of their water and sewer money, does it come back into the general fund?
Yes, sir. To the tune of about $900,000 a year.
Okay, and I also think it's important that people know that our money stays there to keep the utilities safe, and we're not supporting other parts of our government with this money.
That's a critical issue, and this is what Steve and I talk about for the last 3 years, is that taxation without representation. You guys don't do it. You're not taking money out of your enterprise fund to support your general fund. The city of Vero Beach does. Now, to the extent that they didn't have customers outside their community, it doesn't really matter. But it's nothing more than a form of tax if you do that. But when you have customers outside your corporate limits, that is taxation without representation. And that's one of the points that Steve mentioned before, was that if we regionalize this system, everybody has representation in this utility. We're not the city or the shores, or it's not me, it's not this, provincial attitude. We're all county residents. It's the one thing we have in common.
Everybody doesn't have representation, though. We have so many customers that are in the utilities, and we don't take the customers' utility money to put into the general fund that supports people that aren't supporting the utilities. So we're keeping our funds separate.
Agreed. Right.
Mr. To help me understand briefly, where we were in the red by 4%, and the trend continued at 3%. What was it that changed? The economy downturn?
It just looks like you had more. It just looks like you spent more money on renewal and replacement that year. It was a pretty big year. Take a look. You spent about $7 million in renewal and replacement. Must have been a pretty heavy year. You also were spending a lot of money on your interest. Your interest income was down.
Okay.
You were spending a lot of money on building. Joe, help me out here. The West wastewater treatment plant.
But on that one, I might be wrong here. But we had Route 60 for
Route 60 was $4 million.
And when Route 60, we had to take up all that piping and repipe it, and we did that with renewal and replacement.
Okay.
So, and one of the great things about our system is that whenever we have an expense like that, we're capable of doing it out of cash that's available, and that's one of the strengths of our system.
Okay.
Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so that we're all kind of make sure we have the background in place as we walk through this. I think it's important to point out that 25 years ago, the city of Vero Beach actually was doing everybody a benefit by expanding their water system and their electric system to provide service to the South Barrier Island and to the shores. At that time, FP&L didn't have service here. The county utility system wasn't up to speed. So I think it's important, just as we walk through this, that the city really had stepped up and done a lot to allow those areas to flourish. Although having said that, I do agree. I think their system has kind of served the purpose, and now we do need to look at regionalization. But I just want to make sure everybody's clear that 25 years ago, the city did step up to provide these services that otherwise no one else was willing to. So I think we just need to keep that in the back of our minds as we work forward, that we want to continue to cooperate and do what's best. And there certainly is a difference now in the demographics and everything else that we're talking about than 25 years ago. But I think we just need to set that base of where we were and where we're going now.
And if you go back to their initial proposal, when you see it, it's an extremely generous proposal, and it's structured so that nobody's penalized for anything. I think it actually very well takes into account that the city did help everybody at one time, and they're not being penalized for any past actions of any other councils, or for the fact that they took funds out of their utility and put it into the general fund. I mean, it's incredibly even-handed as a proposal, and they ought to be commended for that too.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that's well said, Commissioner O'Brien, that they did help out 30 years ago. But times we do have to keep
I agree 100%. Things are different. The demographics are different. The finances are different.
Sure.
But I want to make sure it doesn't seem like we're just bashing the city when they did the right thing 25 years ago, and just things have changed, and we need to look at maybe an alternative. So.
It wasn't only utilities either. It was beach parks, it was recreation, it was law enforcement. I mean, no, they didn't go outside. They had the largest agency in the county. I mean, the city 20, 30, 40 years ago was king of the hill. And things have changed. So I agree with, and the only reason I'm saying that is I don't want to sit here like we're bashing the city and just paint the tail end of the novel that's written here and not leave out the front chapter.
I don't think anybody's doing that. And one of the things that, if you want to talk historically, I mean, that's why you formed cities. Going back 50 years ago, this was an incredibly rural community. Sure. And little clumps of people came together, and they founded municipalities so they could have an increased level of service. And I think that most of us understand that historical pattern, and that's basically what's occurred. But over the last 20 to 30 years, the county has become more urbanized and has continually raised its level of services.
Exactly.
I'd like to just
Probably ought to let
mention,
them proceed a bit.
I'd like to mention,
I'm happy with the discussion.
I'd like to mention a few things. When you look at this, the renewal replacement, in the 2007-08, we had to move Route 60. That was a $4 million expense. I think when you look at a utility, there's two things. You want to make sure you got a strong cash basis, and you want to make sure you're doing your routine renewal and replacement. Those are two very important. If you stop doing your renewal and replacement in a utility, you run behind. So we've done both. We've kept a strong cash balance and put a lot in renewal and replacement every year, so we've got a quality system. I think that's an important point to make. It's not just cash, but also keeping your system up to date and maintained.
Couldn't agree with you more. Next page. Using the same theory that we laid out for the county, we applied that to the city using its CAFRs. They do things a little bit differently, so it's a little harder to track, but I will take you through it. Using the exact same methodology with having reserves for major capital repairs and regulatory risk, which they don't do. Look, I mean, they would lose money every year. In the years that PRMG looked at them, that's why they came to their conclusion. They should have had an 11% increase in 2006, 24% increase in 2008, and a 19% increase in 2009. That's why they said you have to increase your rates. What's not considered here is are these capital improvements that have been pushed off into the future. And there's considerable debate about that. The city had originally agreed that yes, those things were necessary, and that's why they agreed to the PRMG rate consultants. What happened shortly after that was, I hate to say it, but Steve and I were out making a presentation to the shores, literally where we mentioned that the shores and the county customers in South Beach should return to the county Indian River County water sewer system. Well, the very next day, the rates were repealed. The rate increases for the city of Vero Beach, as proposed by PRMG, were repealed. So, how do you do that? On the back of a napkin? I mean, it's not how you do it. So, take a look at the last year. They did, in 2009, 2010, they did make some money. But I'll draw your attention to the yellow box. They received $2.4 million in grants. That's a one-time deal. Take that out of the equation and they're back to losing money. So, we've already showed their balance sheet. They're in terrible shape. They're, from a rates efficiency standpoint, they're in pretty terrible shape. Let's take a look at just a quick comp.
Just also mentioned 27% increase is what PRMG recommended. If you look at it right now, it's 11, 24, 19%. If they had been increased, it would be close to that range. The difference is the deferral of the capital expenses. So this is another way of proving what PRMG had come up with as to the required rate increases.
Glenn, if I could. Okay, so looking at this then, where we as a county had a red for a particular year, I see there is 3 of them, but is there anything that you can point to, like our State Road 60 project, that would cause 3 years of red on the numbers that you were able to look at?
My understanding is that deep well injection didn't even happen until last year, in the year they made some money. So, you know, I think they've been politically moving these things down the road. This was previous councils in 06 and 07 that were very much interested in maintaining the city's utilities. They didn't want to hear from Steve and I about selling to FP&L. They're very provincial, and I think their attitude, and this is my opinion, but
remember, they did not have a rate and service study until 2009. That's what I presented. So they did not know how bad they were until PRMG came in and looked at the water and sewer and looked at the electrical, and then realized what the base costs were, what they're actually incurring, and what the revenue was, and the prospect for growth.
Okay, so what? Just to reiterate, and for the benefit of the doubt, I mean, we had red in a column once.
Sure.
And our excuse was that we had a $4 million project out of State Road 60.
But you had the cash to pay for it.
True. Yep. But it still showed red.
Yep.
So, yep. But with that being said, if you were given the task to defend the red columns here, how would you do it?
Well, let's take a look at the next maybe this will help with the next, this is the 4-year average. And in that particular case, the county was in the black, well, in the green here. They haven't lost money in 4 years. They've always made money. Take a look at the City of Vero Beach average. They're in the hole by the same theoretical rate sufficiency.
That's an
concept.
average.
I'm also being a bit, the replacement and renewal, I didn't do it for the county, but I netted some contributions for the city. I basically gave them the benefit of additional income with capital contributions that I did not do for the county. So I was being conservative with the city and aggressive with the county. So the county, I can't argue it. Their balance sheet is in tremendously good shape in Indian River County, and the city is not. We know that. And you can track the. Let's go back to that page, Steve. Just go back to the balance sheet for the city. One more. Take a look. This is a defining. This is very defining for the city. Their red number. They keep getting worse. It's because they debt finance everything. There's only one reason why you have that problem. It's because your rates aren't high enough. Your net debt has increased by $10 million in 4 years. There's only one reason for that. Your rates weren't high enough. The county, on the other hand, just doesn't have that problem.
And the elimination of the rate increases did not help in 2009, 2010. It worked against the city.
I'd like to mention one thing here, because we talked about that 5% for regulatory risk, which some people might say is flutter one way or another. But my understanding is that on the bonds payable, short-term and long-term, that went up from 14 to 24 million, most of that increase in debt, is my understanding, was to pay for the deep well injection.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the deep well injection is an example of regulatory risk. It was something that was not in past systems, that you wouldn't have accounted for with impact fees or anything else like that. It was brought about, the need for the deep well injection, as was our Spoonville Marsh, was brought about by change in regulations. And we're facing more changes in regulations down the line. With the total maximum daily loads and the basin management action plans that are underway right now, that risk is extremely sufficient. And there's going to be a need to have cash not just for things like State Road 60, which are pretty much plannable over time, but for an impact like a basin management action plan. And we have no idea yet what the cost of that is going to be, but we do understand that it could be a significant risk to the system.
Commissioner Slaughter, if I might add to that comment, the trouble the city faces is that they are a confined system. They're not going to get any more customers. At worst, they're going to lose 20% of their customers. When you take back your customers in South Beach, this is a critical issue. When you take them back, the city loses 20% of its customers. It loses 20% of its revenues. They can't afford to lose revenues at this point, and that is going to shift the burden of fixed costs onto a smaller number of customers. As Florida grows, it won't be the city growing, it'll be the county. So it's important to recognize that the city is going to have to bear the burden of all future major capital repairs, hence deep well injections, regulatory risk. They're struggling as it is. They're in the red as it is. Their rates are going to get worse. The county can continue to pay for its growth with impact fees. As new customers come in, they'll be able to handle that. And they'll be able to share the burden of fixed costs over a greater number of people in time.
There's also a correlation with the size of the meters and the revenue that you get. There's a greater disparity of rates, higher for the larger meters. So if you lose the county and you lose the shores, 44% of your customers, you've lost more than 44% of your revenue. It's probably closer to 50% of your revenue.
I'll try to wrap this up, but I just wanted to, and using these 4-year averages, Commissioner Davis, I just wanted to, I hope that answered your question to some degree, that the county is doing quite well. Now, I want to take that concept, go ahead. Using that 4-year average is the very first column, Indian River County 4-year average. Take a look, and it's saying that your rates are sufficient. What Steve and I are proposing, and in discussions with Mr. Baird, what we're proposing is that the county actually absorb the debt of the city. And the city basically hands over all of its assets to the county. And the county, the city, obtains county rates. And this is what would happen. There's some discussion as to how big the city is. We think at a minimum, based on the number of meters, it's 31% the size of the county. There's 43,000 customers in the county and 13,000 in the city. It could be as high as 50%, and the higher the number, the better, because that's a greater sharing of fixed costs for the county. But in this particular case, we've just chosen to be conservative, and we've showed it 31% the size of the county. The second column is total City of Vero Beach new territory. You bring in the new revenues based on county rates. You bring in all of the costs based on county rates, the same rate sufficiency that we went through. And in this particular, and we absorb $2 million of debt payment a year for the city. The city territory pays for that. Now, in this case, it loses about $700,000 a year. But here's the benefit. Third column over. Now we get to use the excess capacity in the West Wastewater Treatment Plant and all of the fixed cost sharing. We make that money back. And that's where we came up with a 2% reduction in rates. You could theoretically have a 2% reduction in rates for all county customers as it stands today. That would be the new base of rates. Now, because deferred maintenance if the city has not maintained its system, which it probably hasn't, you may not get the 2% reduction right away. That may be a negotiating point depending on what condition they're in. But theoretically, we're looking at a 2% reduction in rates. This was just a summary of the assumptions. We assumed a 30% reduction in fixed cost sharing when we regionalized the system. Deferred maintenance impacts for the city and the shores of 5%. Annual absorption of city debt of $2 million per year, principal and interest. And these are the meters that they have, and we'll go to the next page.
As the county noted at your presentation to the city, I believe you've got a AAA rating on your bonds.
Yes.
So you probably, I think the cities are maybe BBB on its bonds, so you conceivably have the opportunity of renegotiating the bonds and getting a cheaper rate and limiting the debt further.
So here was the amortization of the city's bonds. This is the city's net debt. This is how much you would absorb from the city, net of their short-term assets, $20 million, and that would get paid off in 13 years using county rates. That's a good deal.
So, just, Mr. Chairman, so the debt, when you say the debt, what has an expert valued the infrastructure of the city's water, sewer, and irrigation?
I would argue that that's not relevant. Unless you're going to privatize. I don't think that's going to happen. Well, these are public assets. They're like roads. What's the value of a road?
I'm good with that, but whenever you start talking about I'm trying to put myself on the other side, and if I were in the city's business, I would say, okay, well, I know what the debt is. This is what my value is, and I think that somewhere in between that would be a way of determining value almost.
Well, I would argue that what the city should be looking at is, okay, we have a choice of either regionalizing or not regionalizing. And if we don't regionalize, we're going to lose 20% of our customers in the shore, in South Beach for certain. That's going to be a major problem for their rates as they stand today. Going forward, they're going to have real problems with rate increases. It is automatic that they're going to have a rate increase. They have to in order to shift the burden of fixed costs to the smaller number of customers. Major problem. It's fair market value.
Let me interrupt, because you talk about value, and you're starting to value it like a piece of land, which has it's one value. But if it's an income piece of property, you value it based on the cash flows, and that's the problem. That's the nub of this. Okay. Is that they haven't increased rates, so they haven't been able to increase cash flow. So by their own inaction, they've limited the value of the asset. And if that's the road they're going to continue down, then basically the system is worth zero. If there's not generating any cash, then the system is zero, and we're still taking the debt. So it's a tremendous. As a city customer, I'm almost going to have to check with Alan to see if I can vote for this because my benefit is so great. But I'm serious. But I had to overcome this talking with Mr. Herron. Initially I thought, well, listen, let's just give them the PMRG rates, which are going to be a lot better in the future. But to answer your question, just like any appraiser, there are 3 or 4 ways of valuing a piece of property. You can't just limit it by assets and say, well, if you're going to sell it, which you're not, what could you get for it? But you're not. It's what's the value of your family home, maybe the rental value of it.
All right, so I'm assuming that nobody has put a number
No,
on this.
That we're aware. We have, perhaps we can pull out the...
Is your microphone on?
I'm sorry. Perhaps we can pull out a replacement value that is on the city's insurance policy, but replacement value would not really be good for this particular purpose.
But if you go back to the slide, and if it's a negative number and you put a cap rate on a negative number, the value is less than 0.
Right.
But I understand what you're talking about. I'm in the business, but the problem is there are 3 ways of appraising property, and I'm just trying to say, if I were a city council member trying to explain to my constituents, why I was making a decision, if there's $20 million worth of debt and somebody in some fashion put some price on it that was either 20 million, 30 million, 10 million, and this is where I made my decision. I don't see how, I understand the financial side of it and how financially it makes sense, but I don't, keeping in mind that there's elected officials on the other side of this that are going to have to answer to their constituents whether they do or do not move forward with this.
You probably would want an appraisal on an appreciated value, and then just to have it in the
whatever they agree upon. I mean,
I think what they're proposing is what we did with Sebastian in 1989. In 1989, Sebastian came to us because they were having problems with their utility. We took their debt out. They bought it for $4 million. We took their debt out and paid it off and took over the system because they couldn't afford to expand it and update it and do renewal and replacement. And they were going to need substantial rate increases. They came to us and we bought their system for their debt and took over their customers, and their customers got the same rate as ours. They're proposing that we do this here. It's very similar, and everyone gets the same rate. Indian River Shores, what they're looking at, City of Vero Beach, we get the same rate as we are right now. And the city also has the ability after that, like Sebastian does, to put a utility tax on top of it to put in their general fund, which Sebastian does.
Well, then with that being said, and maybe I'm jumping to the end of this program, but with the franchise, you're talking about the franchise fee? Is that or just a utility tax?
They have, I think, a utility tax.
Okay. With the utility tax of the same rate that the city of Sebastian has, would that offset what they put in their general fund from WSI?
Well, it'd be 10%. I think Sebastian's got 10%. So whatever 10% of their gross.
Yeah, the city's got 10%. They could continue. The city could continue on with their 10% charge if they wanted to. That's their jurisdictional tax. That has nothing to do with anybody but their own city. If that's what the constituents want to do.
Are they doing that now, though?
Yeah.
So they already do it.
They do it on water. They don't do it on sewer. Okay. So what they would lose would be the transfer to the general fund, which is $700,000 to $900,000.
Which is how much different than what they transfer to the general fund now?
See, the amount of the $700,000 to $900,000 is almost the amount. If you take the value of the 10% higher rates the Shores and the South Beach area has under the franchise agreements, they would lose that anyway if both of those groups go elsewhere in 2016 and 17.
What I'm trying to get at is the loss to the general fund as a city council member is something that is clearly they need to be concerned about. Now, with that said, the loss to the general fund of the transfer from the utility system versus a franchise, what's the spread there, or the 10% utility tax?
Well, the utility tax would continue on. That's a moot point. I mean
So it is a loss to the general fund of?
Here's the argument. There'd be a temporary loss of $900,000 to the general fund, but offset that against, because these are taxpayers, offset that against now the rate reduction they get. Their rates are currently anywhere from 10 to 20% higher than the county as they stand. Right. So it's the same thing we do in the electrical model. We know how much FPL is going to save. There may be some tax increases, but I'll make the point here. I made the point at the city the other week. If the city divests itself of both utilities, why do you need transfers to the general fund anymore? You just created smaller government. Right. That's a critical issue, and you may not need transfers. You may get county rates, FP&L rates, and no property tax increases.
The city has always assumed that they needed those transfers. It's never proven financially or economically that it is required. in order for city operations. If they can prove it financially, fine.
This is a good deal. I mean, we're in this sheet here, we're showing that the county can do it. It can absorb the city's debt. I know you're asking questions about fair market value, but I would argue that that's pretty irrelevant. The city of Vero Beach has two choices: continue on with its current path and lose 20% of its customers in the shores, in South Beach, at a minimum, or do this. In this particular case, they get county rates, and their debt is absolved. They walk away.
It's not just the debt on the bonds either. Remember, the city has also got a $27.5 million unfunded pension liability, so it loses part of that as a result of the transfer. Well,
now how would we do that? I mean, we're FRS, they're not, correct?
It's like anything else. When we take over something, we take it over. We would never guarantee, number one, when we took over Sebastian, we didn't guarantee any. You can't guarantee the employees. You're going to bring over the same amount of employees. The economy of scale, you shouldn't have to. I mean, that's America. I mean, the bigger we are, we wouldn't have to take over a number of employees. They're on a different retirement. They go on the FRS. I don't know what happened on the other side. And it would reduce the liability. I think, that's one of the things. I mean, you can't give those kind of guarantees. No. If we looked at it that way, we would never cut a budget, or, I'd never cut a budget. I've cut 270, had to cut 240 employees over the several years we've had to as a community. If we looked at it that way, that, hey, we'd never cut an employee. We'd never cut anything, we'd increase taxes. Yeah. If you continue to look at it that way, that's all you're going to do. So you have to look and say, look, we can do it. We'd run it. We can't guarantee anyone their job. We can't. We can't guarantee they're going to get the same retirement system. We would need additional employees of theirs, but we wouldn't need every one of them. I wouldn't want to mislead anybody. And they would probably need less, and without city electric or city utilities, they'd need less support staff, so they have a smaller government too and less employees.
Amen.
That's a reality. That's where your savings comes in. We've had to cut taxes. I've had to cut $26 million in taxes in 3 years and reduce costs, and so it's a reality. And eliminate 240 positions, which hasn't been easy, but it's the economic environment we're in. And we work for the taxpayer and the resident, and we have to make those decisions.
I'll wrap it up, and then maybe we get some Q&A. Sorry, go ahead.
No, just think about what Wesley said and listen to this, and I assume based on a couple of comments you've made, the city has seen this whole presentation.
No, this is the first.
We're going to them, and we're going to the shores.
Okay. So the city hasn't seen this?
No, we need your buy-in first, because it'd be you guys absorbing their debt. We have to prove to you guys that, number one, you can do it, and number two, it's in the best interest of all to do it.
Okay, I don't know that it makes a big difference. I'm looking at this like Wesley said. If he was a city council, I had to explain he's got to know the value of something. If I was a city council, I have to explain. I have to say, if I looked at this and agreed with you, I would say, okay, we're losing money every year. We need a way out. A way out would be to contact the county and sit down and put our heads together and say, what can we do that benefits everybody in the county? And the city should be, I'd rather see the city approach the commission or the county and say, we need to talk about this and what's beneficial for all of us, rather than the county sitting here and saying, the city's all screwed up and we need to go fix it.
Oh, the county's not saying the city's all screwed up.
Paraphrasing.
No. But
and that's been said a lot.
But the discussion has to be begun somewhere.
Absolutely.
And looking back at the history, it took us 2 years to get before the city just to make our simple initial presentation. I think this is a fair path forward when Mr. Herron's done the work for the county. I just want to.
You interrupted me. I had the floor. Do you mind?
Oh, my apologies.
Okay, thank you. No, my point is that I would like to see the city approach us on this, and I'm glad you're here. I find this just like with the power plant, and I'd like to see what happens here with everybody in the county and how we can best serve the public and not best serve government. And what you're showing us here, and if I were on the city council, I would be looking at it based on what I'm seeing here. A lot of information here, a lot of numbers, and I've got confidence, and you have great credibility with me, both of you, from over the years. But I just see this just like with the electrical, from what you've presented to us.
I know.
This is a benefit to the city. It's not necessarily a benefit to the county. I mean, obviously increased customer base, et cetera. But this is a big benefit, as was, in my opinion, based what I've seen over the last 2 years with the electrical system. So I would think the city council would be saying, you know what? We need to reduce government. We need to approach the county. We need to get our heads together. We need to see if we can work all this out for everybody and put politics aside and let's look at what's good for the public.
I think we've got to put this provincial attitude that I'm city and shores and county. We're all county residents.
Absolutely.
And I don't think the county, and Bob and I have talked about this, I don't think the county will do as well in the future if the city is unhealthy. A healthy city is a healthy county.
I agree.
So what's in it for the county? Well, I think that's a good thing. I think having good, good healthy neighbors is a good thing. I'll wrap this up, and I want to show you graphically. These are just some charts of where the rates are today versus where they'll be under the regionalized system. And I'm not going to bore you. The graphs show it a bit better. So let's just skip to the graph, Steve. Hopefully you can see this. This is the very top line there, the top curve, purple. That's where the shores, starting out in today, I mean, that's the rates in April 2010, that's the rates as they are today.
PRMG.
Yeah, no, that's the rates as they are today. They are, the shores is 22% higher for water sewer rates using a 6,000 gallon average meter, 6,000 gallons, 5/8 inch meter. They're going to go to 52% higher under the PRMG report. The city is 11% higher than the county. And they're going to go to about 38% higher over the next few years into the PRMG report. That's the red line. Now, the 0% line is where the county is today, and under Steve's and our under this plan, the county would drop down 2%, and the city would be about 3% higher than the county is today. That's because of the 5% deferred maintenance charge. So if you're a city customer, and this is the answer to your question, if you're a city customer, which would you rather have? Would you rather have the top red line that's going to go up to 38% higher than the county? Or would you rather have the flat red line? I'd go with the flat red line. The delta between that, you can actually do calculus and figure out how much money that is between the two red lines. But I'm not going to do that for you because it's been a few years since I've done calculus.
It's also important to note that where it says shores PRMG, that also includes the South Beach area. So my bill would go from 67% above the county rates to 3% under. My bill would drop 70%.
Yeah, let's take a look at the next graph.
Mr. Chairman, real quick.
The final graph.
Glenn, when you present this, sitting here, I'm not sure I would support a reduction in our current rate. Your numbers look good, but there's always some unknown costs and things that could come up and bite us. From my point, I'd rather say if we do the regionalization, let's give it a couple of 3-4 years after we've done that.
Absolutely.
See what the final cost is, and then we can look at a rate study. So just, for me, I think when you present this, maybe I would just show, I wouldn't do a 2% drop in the county rate. I'd leave it where it is. And I think that would be the fairest and most likely scenario. And then if there is a reduction, I think it's several years after we've consolidated, we know what the true cost was.
Absolutely. I think that would be the correct path forward. I want to show you this is 12,000 gallons and 1.5 inches meter. This is something more like what Steve has. And look at the poor county and shores customers up in purple. They're going to be 112. I think it's about 115% higher than Indian River County rates for 1.5 inch meter. So again, city would go from 22% higher all the way up to 90% higher on their current path, and this doesn't even include losing the shores. I mean, losing South Beach customers. You lose South Beach customers, this thing goes exponentially higher. So which would you rather be if you're on the city? I'd go for that down there by 0%. That's kind of a good deal. So, in conclusion, this is a tremendous deal for the city. Not only do you get county rates, you lower your existing rates by 10% if you're a county customer. You get rid of all the risk of losing South Beach because that's going to make you a non-functional system. And you get county rates and you get absolved of your debt. Why wouldn't you go for this deal if you're the city? And the county can do it.
Thank you very much for your patience.
Any other questions of Steve or Glenn?
Yes. You know, it's kind of like, I believe it's the Serenity Prayer or something, you know, it's kind of, God, give me the ability to change the things I can, then the courage to accept the things that I can't, and the knowledge to know the difference. And when I look at this, I really do respect, and I think this whole commission up here does, respects the autonomy of each municipality and their ability to make the decision for those residents. Indian River Shores and the City of Vero Beach have elections to be held accountable for that. Where I am right now is, clearly this is good, but this is almost one of the things that I can't change. It's going to be their decision. We can offer it to them, but I can't. And so I'm going to, try to use the knowledge to know the difference between the two. And I guess really where I'd like to start spending more resources is in the area of the South Barrier Island, because those are residents that are holding this commission accountable for another board's actions. And if we have the ability to start moving forward in providing water, sewer, and irrigation to those residents, I believe it would be incumbent upon us to start moving forward and letting everybody know, even well in advance of the 2011 date, or was it 11? 12? I mean, that's where I am on that issue. As far as the residents that are outside the county, or excuse me, the city, I'm in the same boat with that. Those are the areas that I think that we need to look into right now. Keep moving forward with this presentation. It makes sense to me. I haven't heard anybody refute it. And there might be some things that need to come back and tweak, but on the surface it does make sense. And so I guess really my question to you is what's the short list of 3 things for the county to start servicing county citizens, county residents, not municipal residents, with water, sewer, and irrigation?
This is something, and help me out here, Joe, this is something we could do pretty rapidly, right?
Yeah, I mean, if the city of Vero Beach, we've taken a look at this. We met and we took a look at the data on this, and if we were to take out their data, our proposal here is a proposal that's here. We looked at that, and it reduces the city of Vero Beach's rates. It would reduce Indian River Shores rates, and it reduces South Beach's rates. And we think that's a triple. That's a win-win-win. And we could do that just like we did Sebastian. That's how we did Sebastian. And we're pretty comfortable we could do it. I looked at it with staff after they brought this forward, and we discussed the model. And what hit us at the time, we're all sitting here looking, is that's what we did with Sebastian, and it's worked out. And that's all they could show that proposal, and the city wants, we can move fairly quickly. If they enter an agreement for us to take it over, we issue the bonds, and we could probably be done fairly quickly. Well, and I'm in a position too that I could cash fund it if they said okay, and go back and do the bonds a month or 2 later. Yeah, we're in that position.
No,
to make it even quicker.
That's not Commissioner Davis. I think what we can do, we don't have to wait to the 5-year deadline to give notice that we don't want to renew the franchise agreement. I think we can bring that, one of us can put it on the agenda for next week, because I think it's clear to me we're not going to renew the franchise agreement as it exists now.
Right.
Whether we do a regional or we provide service, we're not going to renew that agreement. Right. So I think we can bring that forward now, let the city know we're not going to renew that franchise agreement, and then I think that provides clarity going forward. There's only 2 options remaining, either a regional system or we provide service to the South County. But I think that takes us that one step by saying we're not going to renew that franchise agreement, and that gets us moving down the road, and we can do that next week.
Well, my question then, I mean, other than one of us putting it on there, because I mean, we could all 5 put it on there, but...
Well, you can make a motion to ask the Utilities Department to just go ahead and put it on the agenda.
Probably the appropriate thing to do is give the county administrator and the county attorney direction for us to have that on the next agenda. At least, what do we have to do to be able to move this thing off center? And I think, quite frankly, then that may, I don't know, help the city of Vero Beach find some direction, as well as the Indian River Shores. But
I think we've got to be willing to cooperate. The city has to make the decision, but where we would cooperate with taking, I think you'd be willing to take the debt out.
No, I'm with you on that, but
They
I'm
have
not, we're
to.
talking about outside of the city limits of the two municipalities,
Basically,
servicing those
if
customers.
I understand what you're saying is, what's the path to move forward to announce to the city of Vero Beach that we're not going to renew the franchise agreement once it's over?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I think that's
Now, and,
that's what we can do to move this forward.
yeah, and I guess I'm trying to move one step faster than that, and that's basically, give county residents county water.
Yeah, but there's a contract.
I understand that.
And that's
I understand.
that's the nub there. We can also, when we do that, not only send a letter to notify them that we're not going to renew, but we could also ask them if we can begin discussions to take over service in the immediate future, if you like.
Well,
I mean, we can begin the
yeah.
discussions. They may not go anywhere, but we can begin those discussions.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Yeah, just to throw a little more light on this, I guess, I've talked to Mr. Plakowicz, and it's not just so simple that we say we're not going to renew the franchise and then we take the utilities. There's a lot of things to be considered in there, and that's the infrastructure, the cost, a whole bunch of stuff that we talked about. But the other thing is if I understand it properly from Mr. Plakowicz too, there could be a legal challenge because of the city's right with utilities to move, like, was it 5 miles outside their jurisdiction, et cetera, and it's been held up in the courts and stuff. I'm not saying that could happen. I'm just saying that we've got to be in the position to negotiate to help residents of South County or the entire county as presented, and not enter into this saying that or thinking that we're going to cancel the franchise and just take it over in 2017 and that's it. It's not that simple. There's not only a lot of questions about cost and et cetera that have to be answered and infrastructure, but also how strong would the city's position be if they opposed it, and what would that burden be, and how far would we be willing to take it, and would the city be willing to take it? So there's a lot of things in here that need to be negotiated out. I agree with the concept and where we're going with this. I just want to throw out that it's just not so simple as saying we're gonna exercise this and not renew the franchise.
and so, but I kind of inferred what you said, though, that if we don't renew the franchise, it really doesn't matter then. Is that correct?
What doesn't matter?
But there's, if we do not renew, if we want to service the county residents, then we have to not renew the franchise.
I think what Commissioner Wheeler is saying is that it's not quite that simple. There are ways for the city to say that even though you haven't renewed the franchise agreement, we're still going to retain control of those customers.
My point.
Well, okay, well, those are things we'd have to work through either with the city of Vero Beach or with the state legislature. I mean, there are paths forward for everything. So the question to me is whether we want to begin this process today with a motion or whether we want to wait a little while longer.
Well, I think based on what I saw here, I mean, I'd love to have open dialogue with the city and and with the shores. I think that it's beneficial to everybody. I would just like, I just think it would be nicer for them to look at this presentation and say they're interested in it, rather than us look at the presentation and go say, this is good for you, so come on over and let's sit down and decide what we're going to do with your utilities.
Well, it's our intent to make the presentation. We had to start someplace.
Right. No, I'm not criticizing you for this.
I think the other thing that's important to know, too, is that of the 22% of the customers of the city water sewer irrigation that are in the county, 95% are in South Beach. There are pockets all around the perimeter of the city. I fully understand the provisions of Section 180 of the law that says the city can do a reach out of 5 miles in the unincorporated area. But that can also be a discussion point of negotiations.
Sure.
It can also be overcome, et cetera. Clearly, and I'm not speaking for South Beach Property Owners Association, which represents 2,600 people, but clearly they want out. They are county residents, county taxpayers. They don't want city rates. They want out. So that throws a burden on the county board.
And I would agree with that, but what I would say, though, is worst case scenario. Let's say that we're not going to renew the franchise, and then we get in a big legal battle, and it costs a lot of money to represent the county side, hypothetically. And then we go along and say, well, then all the questions have to be answered on cost and how we're going to service it and infrastructure and who owns it, et cetera. And we end up spending millions of dollars in legal battles. I'm not willing to do that. I wouldn't be willing to do that to the rest of the county taxpayers that are going to take that burden on to support people that knowingly, when they wanted water, went on the city. I mean, it was a choice they made at the time. And I'm all for helping those people, working with the city, et cetera. But I'm not for going in with a club and saying we're going to do this, and whatever the cost is, we're going to take over this utility for the residents on the South Beach. Because somebody in this county is going to pay that bill. So we got to look at the whole picture, is all I'm saying.
Commissioner Wheeler, if I can just add to that, you mentioned why didn't we go to the city first? Well, number one, we have to come to you guys because we're asking this board to use its financial resources to help the city. And you guys could say to me, hey, no way, I am not doing it. I'm not going to spend our money. I'm not going to absorb city debt. You could take that position if you wanted to. And where does that leave the city? I mean, Joe Bear made a great comment, this is last week, and he says, why would you punish? Because there is another model out there, and it shows it's much worse for the city with higher rates. And his comment was, why would you do that? Why would you punish the city? Why would you punish ratepayers? Why would you punish taxpayers? You're just trying. It wasn't the right thing to do. This is the right thing to do. So I needed to get your buy-in to see whether or not you'd be even willing to do it.
Yeah, and I'm not being critical of you for bringing this to the county. First, it was a decision, a choice you made, and it does start the process. I'm just saying that if I were a councilman, I would like to say, well, hey, show this to me, and then, hey, that's a good idea. Let's contact the county and see if they're willing to play ball with us.
I agree.
Rather than the county going back and saying, you got this problem, we're willing to help you out. It's a little condescending.
I understand.
I think within March, we will have made the presentation to the county, we will make it to the shores, and we'll make it to the city.
Right.
So within 1 month period, talking a lot about 30 days before, within 1 month, everybody will know what the presentation is. Hopefully that will provide a springboard for the jurisdictions getting together and having the discussions.
And I hope that happens.
Yeah.
I'm just concerned that, and please don't take this wrong, but if in fact what you've put in front of us from not just the county's side, but also the city side of the utility issue, I'm very concerned for the residents that are strapped into that business plan or that model.
You mean the city residents?
Yes. Well, the counties too. More so the counties because of the issue of the representation. And so, I mean,
you mean South County like Steve, you mean? South County?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm at a loss.
Yeah.
As far as what to do about it whenever I have constituents that are going to be demanding somebody be held accountable.
The issue was raised about the 5 miles out, the reach out. There is a provision in the Public Service Commission where it does have to approve the sale or exchange of water utilities. So there is an ability, even though 180 exists and provides that 5 mile reach out, there is an ability to go to the Public Service Commission and object to it from the standpoint of the belief of the individuals there, that they're county residents, et cetera. So I'm not entirely hopeless that 5 mile limit is something that would stand before the Public Service Commission, and that's a lot less costly than going into courts too.
Yeah, and what I wasn't even trying to say that's going to happen. I just wanted to say that it's just not so simple as saying we're canceling the franchise or we're going to let it expire and move on. It gets very complicated, and everything would move much nicer, much more smoothly, and everything else if the councils and the county got together, and at some point in time. I wouldn't be surprised that the Board of County Commissioners and both the City Councils sit in one room with their staff and pick all this apart and go through it and come up with. I kind of like what we did with the Sport Village, where you're face to face with the other people that make the decisions, and you can come out of that room with a decision rather than sending staff back and forth and they come back. Oh, well, a few more questions, and they go back over. Well, there's a few more questions, back and forth. So at some point in time, when all this gets out and get aired, I would hope that, just like we've done in some other issues in the past, we get together and sit down and we all get in a room together, put our heads together, and come up with the best solution for the entire county.
I think we're also faced with a city council that's in office right now that is much more amenable to discussions
agree.
with the public, interested in the public, et cetera. And I think that it's been a fantastic group to work with.
Yeah.
And I think we both look forward to working with them again.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so
Different
then it kind of going along the same vein that Commissioner Wheeler's talking about, and then really the purpose for you being in front of this commission today before you go to another, then what ultimately may wind up is a joint meeting like he's talking about. Now, with that being said, you're asking us, are we willing to absorb their debt in exchange for a regionalized system?
As a concept, yes.
In theory.
Concept. I think a lot.
Yeah, and there's a lot of moving parts, but I mean, that's really what you're asking of us today. And then you're going to go back and you're going to tell them what we've said, I'm assuming.
Right.
And then they're going to say yes, no, or no, we want $10 million to boot. And I mean,
Well, we
is
don't
that
even, we don't have to even go anywhere that. Apologies for interrupting.
No.
We don't even have to go that far. I mean, for me, this was just them making a presentation to get material out. I mean, keep in mind on the column of say the City of Vero Beach's numbers, they weren't even available until last week. So the city still has to catch up to this process. I mean, I don't know, but I think the city's 1, 2, or 3 months away from even getting to where we are today. And I don't think we can rush that any. I mean, I've done a lot of other public information requests to try to figure out the city system, and I don't get the information back from them yet. So again, we're at just a certain point here today. I think we've gotten tremendous information out. When you couple this discussion today with the couple that Mr. Olson and Jason Brown and I made a few weeks ago, we've opened up the discussion. And I don't think we can go too much further than this board, further than that now. I think we've let everybody know what most of our feelings are, and now it's time to get more of this information out, not just to the city council, but to as many citizens as we can, to get them engaged in this process.
And I would just say, and I don't think we need a motion there, but I think reading in between the lines here, not everybody's spoken, but there is a consensus that we're willing to work on this problem with both councils for the best interest of everybody in this county that gets utilities and pays taxes. So, and I think, and I'm all for that. I'd love to work with the other two councils and make this work and come up with the best program. And anytime you can work with people rather than fighting with them, you're going to get a better result.
I'd just like to call to mind that the agreements with the shores and the city occurred 5 months earlier than the ones with the county. So their decision date for giving notice to renew or not renew is in November of this year. So there's 2 new town council members that are coming on board in March. So there is a greater pressure that they're feeling than the county may feel.
Maybe you could have your staff
Thank you very much.
look at this and see if they're, I think the answer is staff's probably going to nod their heads.
Well, I know Joe's a little shy, but I think we disagree. I think he was showing he might have spoke
But we thank you very much for it.
And gentlemen, I thank you very much for this whole process. I've learned a lot more about our system, and actually I'm even happier about it than I was 6 months ago. So thank you very much. Appreciate your work and look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And gentlemen, with that, we'll go ahead and take a 15-minute
gather up, we're going for a ride. Let's hope it doesn't come, though. You don't want to. Right. Hopefully.
Hello. Welcome back. We're here at the March 8th meeting of the Board of County Commissioners, and we're moving on to public notice items, which I'll ask Mr. Plackwich to read.
He did so well earlier.
I'm getting hoarse.
What kind?
We do have two public discussion items, two public notice items. The first is notice of a scheduled public hearing on March 22, 2011. That relates to Luisa Garcia's request for special exception use approval for a demolition debris facility and for administrative permit use approval for an associated recycling facility to be known as A1 Wally Recycling Center, located at 6350 Oslo Road. That's a quasi-judicial matter. And secondly, we have a second notice of scheduled public hearing for March 22, 2011. That's a county-initiated request to amend the comprehensive plan's future land use element policy 1.16 to allow up to 25% recreational vehicle use within small mobile home rental parks of less than 20 acres in size, and that's a legislative matter.
Thank you very much, and we're going to come right back to you under County Attorney's Matters with the proposed settlement of the Lewis Barton City First Mortgage Corp. Code Enforcement Board lien.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, by now all of you, I believe, are familiar with this. Our Code Enforcement Board back in 1998 entered an order which ultimately resulted in a $253,000 lien on property located on the beach side. In 2003, and that lien has sat on the property between then and now. In 2003, the owner of the property gave a mortgage to a company called City First Mortgage Corporation, and City First Mortgage Corporation obtained title insurance on its mortgage issued by the company, National Title Insurance Company of New York. That mortgage went into default. City First filed a foreclosure action in 2003, spent 6 years trying to get title to the property, did get title to the property in 2009, spent another couple of years fighting off appeals, appears to now have final title to the property, although we don't know that for sure, but at least on the surface it appears that way. That has put City First in the position of having to deal now with this lien that is on its property from the 1998 Code Enforcement Board action. I came to this board back in December and suggested perhaps we hold a mediation session with City First and with the title insurance company. This board agreed. We had a closed attorney-client session on, I believe, January 18 earlier this year, at which you gave me advice on settlement parameters. I went to the mediation in February and reached what I think is the best result that I was able to reach within mediation. That settlement result was subject to two contingencies, one in favor of City First and the second in favor of the board, in the sense that it does not become final until this board approves it today. The City First contingency has closed, so at this point the only contingency remaining is whether or not this board approves the settlement. Settlement calls for basically two things. Number one, the title company will pay us $150,000 to release our lien. And number two, City First will, as you know, there is a partially completed structure on the site. It is considered, I believe, an eyesore by the neighbors. And City First has agreed to promptly remove that eyesore from the property. And there are some time frames for all of that to happen, but the time frames are very quick. So that if this board were to approve today the settlement, then City First, I believe, has 15 days to apply for demolition permits, 30 days thereafter to tear the facility down to the slab. At that point, the title company would pay us the $150,000, and at that point we would release our lien, and the matter would be over. The only additional item is we are going to additionally give them a release on a second Code Enforcement Board lien that we have out there that came on in 2006. Technically, that's already been removed by the foreclosure judgment and the foreclosure sale, but just as a belts and suspenders approach, we're going to include that lien in the release as well. So that's the proposed settlement. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fletcher.
Counselor, thank you for your diligent efforts, and I believe that you well represented this board, and I'd like to make a motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve from Commissioner Fletcher, a second from Commissioner Wheeler. Any discussion?
Yes. In looking at this, I feel very comfortable that we are in a first position in this instance. I see us giving up almost as much money here that we're fixing to, that we're quite frankly probably fixing to lose on the Gifford Gardens. Gentlemen, just for the record, the other day there was a lis pendens filed by Mr. Barton on this property again. I understand it was dismissed by the federal courts.
Yes.
Immediately almost. But the way I view this is that until I'm confident that this isn't a reduction in lien for Mr. Barton, which the only way I'd be comfortable doing that is to have a purchase and sale contract in our hands from a third-party buyer here to reduce this lien. I am not comfortable moving this forward. There's been a payout from the title company. This is an effort to recoup those dollars from the county. I would say that the anger and the angst and the situation has cost the county, the residents, and everything surrounding this issue more than the total figure. We have not had anything like this, I'll grant you that, but we certainly have not reduced these liens for others. We've got one that somebody's talking about right now for a $15,000 issue for cutting vegetation. Don't know where it's going to wind up. This is not impeding the sale of this property. There's equity here. I think it's setting bad precedent.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wheeler.
Mr. Flagwich, if we don't accept this, what process and time frame are we looking at and risk factor to move forward with denying this or refusing this?
Well, the process is as follows. The mortgage company has filed a suit against us, which is presently pending, seeking to establish that their 2003 mortgage ought to have priority over our 1998 lien under a doctrine called equitable subrogation. I think that that's an extremely long shot on their part, and I expect we're going to win that case. We did win it at the trial level. They've taken an appeal. It's pending before the 4th DCA, and resolution before the 4th DCA from this point forward is probably a 1-year process. If we win that case, then, as I've said before, nobody writes us a check. We simply still have our lien out there, and we have priority over their mortgage. So at that point, if this board wants to take the step to convert its lien to money, we would have to file a foreclosure action to foreclose our lien. In that action, we would have to beat back anybody who chooses to challenge our lien, either on a procedural basis or a substantive basis. I have had discussions with all of you separately on what risk factors, if any, might arise in that situation. But that situation is probably, it could be up to another couple of years. So I would say if you choose not to accept the settlement and proceed forward and fight for the final dollar in court, you're probably looking at about 3 years to do it.
Oh, a couple other follow-up questions. One, what would be the legal cost and time? Mm-hmm. Also, how long is this lien good for? Is it good in perpetuity?
No, the lien's good for 20 years. We've been using 20 years from 1998, so it goes out to 2018.
And if this is dragged out in court for the 20 years, do we lose the lien?
No. We have to file our case to enforce the lien within 20 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I'm mad about the interruption last time.
Yeah.
Scolded. Try to save you.
Thank you, and I appreciate and I don't follow the logic of your question, where I look at this. And
it's happened before.
For good reason.
Yeah.
You were right once.
What in all likelihood is going to happen here is, I think we've heard from our counsel that we'll probably be victorious in the appeal with this financial institution. The title company is probably the one that is driving this lawsuit in an effort to recoup their mistake that they had to pay a claim on. And in reality, right after they get the verdict of whether or not the county or they are right, there will be a purchase and sale contract probably on this. It's an oceanfront lot. It's big. It's got some, probably, I'm going to say maybe $17,000 worth of impact fees on it, available for another structure. There's very little downside that I see here to the county. I just think that the taxpayers deserve what they've got.
Do you see this as having a small downside? I recall when we spoke a month or so ago that even if we won everything, there's no guarantee you're going to get the money.
Of course not. Yeah.
Well,
this is
in the current
one
case,
in the hand instead of two in the bush is the way I'm looking at it.
Well, in the current case, that's accurate, but in the second case, I mean, if you win that foreclosure case, I believe you will get the money. I don't think there's anything having priority in front of us. And the property has a tax appraised value as of January, as I recall, of roughly $1 million. So it appears that there's equity in the property.
Okay. And the structure will be removed regardless of what we do?
Well, not necessarily. Structure is there.
How about the neighborhood again?
Well,
this has been going on for years.
Oh, I know. And quite frankly, if I really felt like that Mr. Barton was out of it, and I know we're getting closer, but right now, the move to get Mr. Barton out of this is being paid for by somebody else and not by the county. And I think that what they really ought to do is go ahead and put the property on the market, bring us a purchase and sale agreement, and if for some reason it's shorter than what we have there, as far as our lien, then we sign off it on that time. Right now, I think we're being sold a bill of goods.
And that could happen, I would think.
It should happen. That's the right thing
No,
to
I
do.
mean, it could happen. I mean, depending on what the bank, who shows up to bid, et cetera, you don't know what it's going to go for.
No, the property right now is owned by the bank, and what they would probably do is find in fact, there's a good realtor right here in the neighborhood. Go ahead and list the property, and
then for the next 2 years, or whatever it takes, is the structure going to remain on the property possibly?
Sure.
That needs to be removed?
Yeah, in the absence of this settlement, there's no requirement at the moment that they remove that structure. So
the neighbors have to put
it's kind of up to them to decide when.
And I think the neighbors are more interested in getting their neighborhood back and cleaned up than.
And I don't doubt that. But of course, there's and I'm wanting to get that accomplished also. But I don't see why we can't get that accomplished, and see to it that the other, I don't know, 100,000 residents of Indian River County don't get basically what this gentleman has pulled them through and not hold backwards for the expense of $253,000.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner O'Brien.
Commissioner Davis, I agree with a lot of where you're coming from. I look at this, in the investment world, there's an old saying that the bulls make money, the bears make money, but the hogs get slaughtered. And I do see this as a bird in the hand compared to two in the bush. And we've all heard the horror stories on real estate where somebody had an offer for a property and they got greedy. They said, no, I want more. And the market turned and boom, now they're $300,000 lower than where they were. I would like to see this issue gone, and I see this as a way of getting there. Also, I think Attorney Collins had stated when this first came up to us that he estimated there's about $80,000 of actual county cost involved with this. So we're not only getting the $80,000 taxpayer cost, but almost 100% return on that. And I think it's important for the residents that this structure get torn down. And so I do understand, we probably do have a strong case, but I think every year that this continues on, there's a potential for it to crumble and we'd end up short. So I'm going to go ahead and support the motion there, just because I'd like to see this done. I think we're getting a very good amount of dollars, more than above and beyond what it costs the taxpayers, and we'll give the residents some relief and close this case out.
And I appreciate everything you said. I do not believe that our code enforcement issue is standing in the way of that. I think what you have is a title company that had to pay about a $600,000 claim, is trying to cut their losses with some corporate attorneys from Atlanta. And that is what I see is happening here. This lien on this property that code enforcement has there is relatively insignificant to value and would be insignificant to the purchase and sale of this property. I wouldn't even be surprised if there's not an attorney out there trying to do it on a contingency basis of seeing how much that they can get shaved off the entire amount. And I think that's really where we are. I think we've heard it from our attorney that we are, in his opinion, a secure position, not absolute, but he thinks it would be a stretch to be able to move their loan ahead of our code enforcement lien. And I appreciate the fact that this $80,000 figure has been put on there. I think the angst has been more than that. And I do not think that this is holding up the sale of this property at all.
Well, the angst is in the neighborhood.
I understand that.
And the neighborhood wants it cleaned up.
I understand that. And then
It's gone.
I think that the county is in a situation where they ought to get what this gentleman has put them through the knothole backwards on. And I think that in short order, the neighbors would also get rid of the angst.
Well, Commissioner Davis, on this one, I'm going to support you, but as you said before, I think we can count to 3-2. So if you'd like, I'll call the question.
Okay.
Okay, that we have a motion from Commissioner Fleischer, a second from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All against?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-2. Commissioners Davis and Solari against. Next up is Commissioner items. And next up is Commissioner Bob Solari. I want to discuss this morning a little bit about the Amtrak Florida East Coast Rail Corridor project. And in the past weeks in this chamber, I felt a real strengthening wind of fiscal responsibility blow through the commission officers, and I think that now is the time is right to strike against some of these obscene federal boondoggles, which are actually siphoning millions and billions and now trillions of tax dollars out of the hands of our citizens and putting them who knows where. A couple of weeks ago, the governor turned back $2.4 billion of borrowed federal dollars when he said no to high-speed rail. And today I'm asking for this commission to turn back the $250 million for the Florida FEC Amtrak Rail Corridor project. And to frame this issue, I'd like to read something that was just from this weekend's Barron's. And this is a quote. All our taxes only pay for Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans programs, federal retirement funds, and some lesser mandatory programs. This year, the government is borrowing for all of its regular government programs, all federal and military salaries, all military and civilian procurement, and all the interest on the national debt, borrowing money, your tax dollars, to pay for that. The Amtrak rail project will initially be paid for with more borrowed dollars and then enjoy future subsidies paid by more borrowed dollars. And what for? In this project, there's been no investment-grade financial plan. The only thing close to a plan that I've been able to find after 2 years of trying is something called the Financial Plan for the Florida East Coast FEC Corridor Amtrak Service High-Speed Intercity Rail HISPRA program. Basically, the name of the plan describes the contents. There's no real plan inside. In trying to find out what the subsidy for this is. In other words, what subsidy the taxpayers are going to pay for each dollar of ticket revenue generated. I got what I referred to a couple weeks ago as an example of Orwellian bureaucraties. And this is just one sentence from the letter I got back from a person who works at the Florida Department of Transportation. This is a quote. So I asked what the subsidy was, which was a fairly clear question, and the response included this sentence: the related subsidy cost defined by Amtrak to correlate with the 23% cost recovery percentage is similar to the fare box return for most major transit systems in Florida. Now, if anybody in this room really understands what that means, please come and explain it to me at the next break. I tried to piece together this Orwellian bureaucraties, and I think the bureaucraties part is perfectly clear. The Orwellian part takes a little more digging into, and it has to do with the fare box return. Okay, fare box return I take to be a hidden phrase for ticket revenue. But it's only when you actually read the HISPRA that you find out that ticket revenue is the revenue that's actually generated by a ticket and all food and beverage revenue that's generated during the ride. And again, nobody without reading that thing could actually figure that out. And going on, you have a problem with the number of borrowed dollars needed to fund the project, and also, but importantly, the reason besides transportation for the train, the whole thing. And this is quoting from the financial plan. The proposed FEC Amtrak service is not only a question of providing a transportation alternative that is more cost-effective and environmentally friendly than automobiles or airplanes, but that promotes more geographically concentrated real estate development or redevelopment, which is more environmentally sustainable in the long term. And when you get unpack that question or that phrase, you find out that this type of redevelopment would call for, in the core area within 1 mile of the train station in towns like Vero Beach, you'd have a density of 15 to 25 units per acre. So tell the people of Original Town that you think their density needs to be increased to, say, 20 units per acre, and see what happens to you. So I'm asking, in short, for this board to reverse the resolution 2009-120 that wasn't support of this proposal, and to pass a new resolution asking to end the madness of the Amtrak FEC Rail Corridor project.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wheeler.
I wish you felt this way an hour ago, but that being said, your comments took longer than Alan reading the contract, but I still agree with you, and I'll make a motion that we in fact do a resolution. I support the governor's position on this and opposed to Senator Nelson's position, so I would support that and make a motion that we in fact do a resolution, I guess, supporting the governor's position on not accepting the money and not doing the high-speed rail.
No, this is for
the north-south corridor.
We have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler. I'll second it. Any discussion?
Yes.
Yes. Commissioner Davis first.
Well, first of all, next time I'm going to bring my pink Snuggie for your oration, and what Mr. Plakowicz is reading all the way up to section or supplement 84. But with that being said, if I'm not mistaken, we took a position on this at the MPO level. Is that correct?
We did. Yes, it was a 4-to-1 vote.
And
about 12-to-1.
Right. And that was. I'm trying to remember. I thought that was in favor of. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And while I agree with you, as far as everything you laid out there and in front of us and the costs and all that kind of stuff, there's a process that we've gone through, and I can't believe I'm talking about going through the process versus just let's go ahead and get her done. But clearly, I think the MPO spoke, which is a representative of the municipalities and the counties. And with that being said, it is what it is, and they have spoken, and we have taken a vote on this already.
I don't think Bob gave quite a clear position, though, that he did it.
Well, there was some words that he
No, because at that time when it came before the MPO the first time, I hadn't had 2 years to find out that there was no financial information. If you want, I can start reading from the financial plan, and if you thought that what Alan thought was bad in bureaucraties, I mean, this is absolutely. Let me calm down.
Again,
I consider this close to fraud on the taxpayer. So with something like that, we don't need to go back to the MPO. We didn't have to pass the first resolution, and it's well within our power and authority to pass the second. But things have changed in those 2 years.
I agree.
Including the fact that we have a new governor and a new legislature up in Tallahassee, which understands that trillions and trillions of debt are unsustainable.
Mm-hmm.
When this first came before the MPO, it wasn't clear that there was no financial plan, and it wasn't clear that each year you take on more debt, first for the capital plans, then second, more debt on the federal level and possibly on other levels for the operating expenses, and more debt to pay the interest that's accumulating on all this. This is obscene.
I agree.
And so we don't need to go back to the MPO to restart the process, which is the first time in 2 years I've ever heard you suggest something like that, which is a real stretch, perhaps the stretch of the day. We can do the right thing right here and right now, and that's what I suggest that we do.
Was there a second?
And yes, I seconded it. And I'll let you take it off my hands. Just taint yourself with it. No, you won't. Not I suggest that you actually read it. Oh my gosh!
Taint myself.
He's going to have to need.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner O'Brien.
Respectfully disagree with you. I think if you want to be fair here, you should do a financial analysis of the cost of our interstate system and do a financial analysis of all of our transportation systems
for that. Who's
here in
gonna
the
have one of
county. No transportation system makes money. That's why we continue to have gas taxes. That's why we continue to have sales taxes going to this. If we wanted to get rid of everything that does not make a profit, we should close our libraries because they don't make a profit. We continue to subsidize them. So, and if you want to do a cost analysis, I think we should look at the cost of widening I-95, the billions of dollars we're going to be spending there, the cost of the carbon impact, the cost of having our men and women in the armed forces in foreign countries to keep the oil flowing. So I think if we want to do a financial analysis, there's a lot more things that need to be factored in. Secondly, I agree with you that probably Vero Beach and New York County will not benefit from the Amtrak as a purely transit system. That no, we don't have the population mass. However, I see it as a huge draw for people down in Miami, Broward County, Palm Beach, Jacksonville, to hop on a train, and in 2 hours they can be in Vero Beach. They could get a shuttle to the hotel on the beach, spend a weekend here, spend money, get back on the train and go home. I see it as a huge economic driver for our community to bring visitors here in a very affordable fashion for them, and they don't have to drive on I-95. So I think it is still a good project. Will there be subsidies? Absolutely. Every transportation project government does is subsidized one way or another. None of them make a profit. Even the turnpike with the tolls doesn't make a profit. So, if we want to get rid of everything that doesn't make a profit, then we need to shut down just about every government service we provide. So I'll disagree with you. I think the Amtrak project will bring a lot of benefit to the community, and if it helps take cars off the road and we can take gas tax money instead of building more lanes on the interstate and killing more people there, we can get them on a train. I think that's better for us. So
I'd like to, if I could, first put the subsidy into perspective. And this is out of an article by Robert Samuelson, who's an economist, I believe, writing with the Washington Post. Rail buffs argue that subsidies for passenger service simply offset the huge government support of highways and airways. The subsidies, quote, level the playing field. Wrong. In 2004, the Transportation Department evaluated federal transportation subways from 1990 to 2002. It found passenger rail service, that's what we're talking about today, passenger rail service had the highest subsidy, $186.35 per 1,000 passenger miles, followed by mass transit, $118.26 per 1,000 miles. By contrast, drivers received no net subsidy. Their fuel taxes more than covered federal spending. Subsidies for airline passengers were about $5 per 1,000 mile traveled. All the figures adjusted to the year $2,000. It also notes in this article that Amtrak represents 1/10% of the national total. So basically, if you had this boondoggle and paid another $250 million for it, you wouldn't have a noticeable impact on I-95, which basically does pay for itself through the gas tax dollars. So what we're doing here is saying that we're going to add another layer of unpaid for infrastructure, which again, obviously I think is the wrong thing.
And again, Mr. Chairman, I'll point out, I'm sure that did not factor in the carbon impact that we have with all these cars on the road. It didn't impact the billions we spend on our military to keep the oil flowing. Didn't factor in the cost of the Deepwater Horizon spill. It didn't factor in all the true cost of having an automobile-based system. So, yeah, you can quote that, but I don't think those numbers look at the true cost. And it's because we keep looking at Atlanta or L.A. They just keep adding lanes and lanes and lanes to the interstates to encourage everybody to have their individual car to drive their solo drive to work. At some point, if we say, you know what, we're not going to widen 95 anymore, we have a train available, I think more people will start riding the train. Instead, we just keep adding lanes to make it easy to drive your car.
Well, I think one financial analysis would be a great thing. But by the time you add in passenger miles traveled, the trains get crucified. And so do subway systems and bus systems and everything else, except the ones in very large cities where the culture, like in New York City, where the culture, you grow up with a culture of not owning a car and using public transportation. The reason I believe Los Angeles keeps adding lanes of traffic is because they can't change the culture. People won't give up their independence. Now, you can force them to do that, like they do in some other countries that aren't a republic. But when you add in per passenger miles traveled, traveling by an automobile is very inexpensive. And when you look at some of the trains and what they subsidize them and how many passengers are on those trains, they're running empty. I was back in the 80s when President Reagan was in office. I got invited to the White House for a White House briefing on a portion of the budget. And one of the things he mentioned was the transportation system they were building at the time in Miami, which was like a subway or rail system. He said the cost of that, operating it and maintaining it for all the projected users. Now, this came from the budget director for the President of the United States. He said, and I quote, "We could buy every passenger that's projected to use that a new Cadillac every year and still be ahead financially." They don't work because people won't give. Maybe 100 years from now, everybody will be doing public transportation. But it's a culture change, and you can't put it in and say people are going to use it because they aren't going to give up their cars. I live in a neighborhood with 109 houses. When people go to the clubhouse, they get in the car and drive around the corner.
Isn't that a shame? Speaking of public transportation, one of my great fears is that going forward a few years, when we've accumulated all this debt, additional debt, and we no longer can really afford to take on any more, and the bond markets say that's enough, what's going to happen is other areas of our government are going to be squeezed. And this community has a great bus system. Our cost per passenger mile on our bus system is $1.94 per passenger ride, which is a tremendous benefit to people who live and work in Indian River County. Yeah. And I'm afraid that the $2 million which pays for that is going to be gone in some other Washington or state budget hearing that we don't have control over. And so we'll be able to have a few people come up and down the east coast of Florida, which is great. But we're going to remember, we're going to have almost 1 million passengers on our bus line this year, and those are the people who are going to be hurt by this. So, any other comments, and I'm going to have to bring out my big guns.
Chairman.
Commissioner Fletcher.
You know, today's been a very interesting day. We've done a lot of...
Here's a swing vote, by the way.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way, and then that was very nice, and I heard some comments. Commissioner Wheeler, you talked about New York City. I felt that was a message for that swing vote as well. Thank you for that subliminal tip. You know, yeah, in New York City, you are reliant upon, you can't traverse in Manhattan without the subway or a cab. And I'm sure that they're not in the black in that system. There's standing room only. Wow. We could tell you stories. But nonetheless, I'm sure 100 years ago, when they were talking about that subway system, it was well in the red. And it was comprised of, I think, 7 different companies. And it's gone through tremendous moves, and it's probably one of the most advanced subway systems in the world. One of, not the. However, we have to start somewhere. And we have to look at transportation. I would not like to see us forego the opportunity of advancing to success and looking back and saying, you know, we had that option. We had an MPO meeting where a majority, an overwhelming majority, just short of one individual who supported this entire process. We grossly discussed this at the MPO. There was a lot of factors involved in it, and I just remember the overwhelming support. So if you call it a swing, I want to swing forward for the success and working for the greater good of the people and counting us in on any option of transportational success and advancement for this community, whether it be economic success, a draw, a way to get here, a way to get out of here, just a stop. And that was my original intention, was to talk about being part of the system, and I think that's what we discussed at the MPO. If we count ourselves out early out, but not for, we would not have a stop here in Vero Beach. We're looking at trying to invest in our sporting environment, and we talk about heads to beds, and we talk about industry advancement and all of the economic improvements and sanctions that we've done to create jobs and to be a stronger draw. I think we need to be counted in on this. Thank you.
One last comment, Mr.
No, I'm
Chairman.
going to have one last after you, so yours is the
Uh-oh,
second.
sounds like I might have sparked the comment.
No,
I'm going to comment too.
I can count.
And then I might want to comment on that comment.
The only thing I would say is at some point in time, government, and we're there, I think, at every level, has to quit rationalizing and justifying doing what's good for the future when we can't afford it.
And I'm going to read just 2 paragraphs instead of the whole thing, because I don't want to put Commissioner Davis to sleep or anything.
Without my Snuggie.
But I read this weekend, and I just said, well, if I have an opportunity, I got to read it at the commission meeting. And I was going to forego it, but...
You have Alan read it.
I'm not reading anything in the future without a waiver signed by each one of you.
But this is from George Will. And this talks about the future and all the future benefits, I guess, that we're going to be having from all this. Generations hence, when the river of time has worn this presidency's importance to small, smooth pebble in the stream of history, people will still marvel that its defining trait was a mania for high-speed rail projects. This disorder illuminates the progressive mind. Then the rest of it's really good, but just the last paragraph. Time was, the progressive cry was, quote, workers of the world unite, or power to the people. Now it's less resonant, all aboard.
So what we're saying is let them eat cake.
Wrong history lesson, Joe. Wrong history.
I think you're all throwing in these diatribes.
All right.
Okay,
I'm
so
getting
we've
hungry
got-
talking about cake and Subway.
3-2. We evidently have my quote caused some consternation for the audience. So Ms. Renzi, come on up and.
Now, while we're doing that, we're about an opinionated group of people, just to put the record.
Say that again.
Good morning. Name and address for the record, please.
Today.
Thank you. Renee Renzi, Waverly Place, Vero Beach. Obviously, I totally endorse everything Commissioner O'Brien said, so I don't need to repeat that. I just want to remind this commission that about 10 years ago, when this was a hot topic, the commission sent Stan Mayfield to Tallahassee to argue for it. And it looked as though it was about to happen, and I was so pleased because I think this is a great benefit to this community. It's not a high-speed rail line that needs millions of dollars to build. We have the rail line. It's kept in good shape because it has to handle all those heavy freight trains. Most of the communities up and down the coast have an existing station. Ours is in great shape. Some of them will have to rebuild, but those are not expensive. They don't go into the billions. And as a resident midway down the coast, I would go north to visit Cocoa and Merritt's Island. I'd go north and south. I don't like to drive on 95 anymore. My family forbids me to drive on 95. But I could hop on a train and get to any of those destinations, have a lovely day, and come home. Tourists coming here from all over the world, down there in Miami perhaps, they could hop on a train and go as far as Vero Beach, spend the day, spend the night, then go on up to Merritt Island, spend the day, spend the night, and then eventually return to Miami without ever having to get on deadly 95 or the Turnpike. I think this is a great benefit economically to all the little towns along the coast. It did a great job before the freight took over. It could do a great job again. And I would be very disappointed if you didn't endorse this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it's my turn to count to 3, and I have, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Aye. We have a motion from Commissioner Wheeler. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
That was 3 opposed to this great motion.
Now, Mr. Chairman.
That's Davis, Fletcher, and O'Brien, who are the progressives today.
Oh, my.
Progressives, at least you did that in a kind of gentle
Yeah,
manner.
I appreciate
Thank you
that.
for that.
I tell you what I'm going to do. Since I agree with you in principle.
Hey, I hate it when you agree in principle and I lose the argument.
Well, that's okay. I'm going to give you the opportunity. Either you can go over that one more time at the MPO meeting, or you can have Alan read it. I'm good with either one. And state your case there. But I do think that the long-term transportation plans for Indian River County, as well as resolutions that affect it to the point of allegedly this Amtrak agreement could, that's the place for it to come back. I'll even reconsider it and then hand you the floor. How's that?
You know, I'll be very happy to take the longer indirect road rather than the straight line.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
I'll put it under my matters, and then you can give the presentation at the MPO.
Thank
And then you have the daunting task of incorporating the municipalities and as well as other commissioners at that time to change their mind.
I feel those slings and arrows already.
Just figured you would enjoy those.
I will do that. I don't think we need a motion to do
You
that.
encouraged him.
So we'll move on. So we'll move on to my second item, which I almost afraid it's going to have just as much success as the first, which is to just open up a discussion on pensions for elected officers. We've had a lot of talk on pensions in, not just here, but in Tallahassee and all over the nation lately. And in looking at ours, under the FRS, we're under the county elected officials, which gives us a benefit per year of service of 3%. The regular class of county employee is 1.6%, and I believe that's the classification we ought to be in. So I want to see if I can get any support for going to our delegation and telling us to move out of the state elected officials, or to move state elected officials from a 3% class to that 1.6% class, and would, on the investment plan portion of the retirement system, suggest that we ask that elected officials start making a contribution to it. And I'm not sure what that number ought to be because I'm not familiar enough with the whole pension system, but I believe we ought to drop the county portion to some degree, maybe 5%, and take that 5% up ourselves. So that's the question I'd like to discuss a little bit.
Two things there. One is there's two bills now, the governor's proposed budget that require all FRS participants to do a 5% contribution, and then the Senate bill is a 2% contribution. So I think they're already working on some level of employee contribution, which would apply to elected officials as well. I can go either way. If you want a resolution supporting one number or the other, I don't have
a resolution supporting the 5% if that's.
we can do that. The second thing is if you want to have all elected officials out of the special risk category, I don't think that's going to fly. They're not going to vote to remove themselves from that. But I think maybe if you just want to say local elected officials, they might be more willing to do that. But I don't think they're going to take themselves out of it. Just a practical matter.
I'd rather.
Mr. Chairman, I understand what Commissioner O'Brien's talking about, but you know what? I really do think it would be hypocritical of anybody to impose the retirement reduction without imposing it on themselves. And if we're going to have county employees contributing, and we're going to have county employees accepting less in FRS, which I can't, in these times, I don't know that this is the wrong thing to do. I want to make sure that I'm in the same boat, that this gets spread evenly. And I would feel it is exactly as bad as the commissioners getting a salary increase on years whenever we're laying employees off because of a decision that's made in Tallahassee, and that is wrong. And so just to summarize it, what I would suggest that we support the legislators and the governor's efforts to reduce the percentage of FRS that elected officials make and support a individual contribution to FRS.
That's certainly close enough to what I was trying to get to the second.
Yeah, but I didn't want to go to the 1% or 5%, 2%.
That's fine.
I
wasn't married to any particular thing. I just wanted to get the discussion going and move elected officials in the right direction.
I would agree with Wesley, and I think that we should support that through the legislature because we're not charter government here, so we can't do it locally.
Thank God.
I'm happy with that. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor of Commissioner Davis's motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Davis. And we've got an item from Commissioner O'Brien, Hibiscus Festival Shopping Cart Food Drive.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hopefully
It's
this
gonna be
will,
as radical as
this will go very
Amtrak.
smoothly. There'll be no federal subsidies required.
Any readings? Would you read the rules?
Yes, yeah, let me start here. Or Alan, could you start please? I think some of you are aware the Harvest Food and Outreach Center just opened up a new center up off US 1 and 27th. They take contributions from stores and public donations and stuff and provide not only the food at about a third of the grocery store price for needy families, but also counseling and other support. They have a fundraiser. Basically, different businesses will sponsor a shopping cart, and in April for the Hibiscus Festival, they have a parade. I was there last year. It was a hoot of fun. All the different how they decorated the shopping carts was a lot of fun. So I'm asking the board to sponsor a cart. I thought we'd put it out here in the lobby. Ask people to come in, bring food items to donate, and I'll make sure that our cart is down there at the Hibiscus Festival. If any of y'all would like to join me for the parade, you'd be more than welcome. But I think it'd be a good way to get some support for the Harvest Food and Outreach Center. So I'll just make that motion that the board approve participating in the shopping cart food drive.
Question. I take it when you say the Board of County Commissioners, you mean us individually, and that this is something that will be done with no tax dollars, kind of like this chili cook-off?
Exactly. We'll put the cart out in the lobby.
We enlist our wives to decorate it because we're not talented in that area, things like that?
Right.
Okay,
I believe
fine.
your wife is the most creative, so.
So any cost would just chip in.
Exactly. It's
Well,
the five.
split
This
that
is
4 ways?
5 ways.
Oh, 5 ways?
5 ways. I
thought we were always putting things 4 ways these days.
Peter?
Okay.
I just
Just asking.
want to make the audience clear that this is, no tax dollars are going to this project. And as a matter of fact, no staff time, because I see Vero Beach Mayor in the audience. None of our staff time is going to be involved in this either.
Yeah, we could issue a challenge to the city.
They
up to it. Well, we already kicked them in the chili contest.
No,
We don't
but
wanna kick them out of that.
this is different though. That chili cook-off, we did it on the Manly Man thing like chili, but they won the foo-foo thing.
Salsa?
The salsa contest. And we're talking about a well-decorated cart. So I believe they have the skill sets for this. I think we'll take this opportunity to lodge the challenge now. So Mayor, your challenge to this, I believe our talented others can outdo, well, only if you do it without the city staff, outdo whatever you can present for this. And we'd like to see that the press come often and compare the cart in the city with the cart in the county, and maybe have one of those public polls they have, one of those internet polls, and let the people take their votes.
I think
this is good.
Mr. Chairman, you're expressing this opinion on just one municipality. Would not we want to open up this horizon to all? This is a great opportunity to all of the municipalities in the true spirit of global
I will put the letter out.
commitment and competition.
I will put the letter out with the help of Commissioner O'Brien. We'll draft something out and put the challenge to everybody. But we know that in the past, they've not risen to the challenge.
Maybe they'll take
Only
this
the city of Vero
opportunity.
Beach did
Commissioner
last time.
Davis is best at writing a little trash talking letter.
Yeah, I can talk smack. But what I'm worried about is the 44-cent stamp of the taxpayers going on it.
I got those. I'll give you them.
Just real quick, Mr. Fleck, which I do sit on the board of Harvest Food and Outreach. I just want to make sure I don't have to abstain from this.
No, I think you're fine on it.
Okay, all right. Do you want a motion on that?
I think I made a motion, Commissioner
okay.
Wheeler.
Would you like to second it?
I would like to second it.
We have a motion for Commissioner.
Seconded it already.
No, I'd rather
Already
second
been
it.
done.
Batter, and you've
Yeah, you've been
seconded so much
you've
today.
been seconding all the time.
I'm accepting Commissioner Davis the second for this. Commissioner O'Brien's motion, Commissioner Davis the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you, gentlemen.
And we'll go back to, if we could, a little more serious business. Next up, we have the solid waste disposal.
Mr. Chairman, move to approve the minutes of the December 21st, 2010, and the January 11, 2011 minutes.
We have a motion to approve Commissioner O'Brien, a second for Commissioner Fleischer. All in favor? Aye. Passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Next up is an approval of bid award for the Indian River County bid number 2011027, Phase 1, Site Preparation, Class 1 Landfill, Segment 3, Lateral Landfill Expansion. Who writes this stuff?
Move approval.
The people that are hired by an RFQ instead of an RFP.
Motion to approve from Commissioner Fleischer. I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes 5-0. And
Mr. Chairman, before you adjourn, just a quick mention. This afternoon at 4 o'clock, there is spring baseball going on at the Vero Beach Sports Village Holman Stadium. The Italian national team will be playing a spring exhibition game, and it's only $5 for a ticket. The weather will be beautiful, the beer will be cold, and there'll be baseball going on. So I'd like to have everybody come on out and participate at Holman Stadium today at 4 o'clock.
That said, we're adjourned. Thank you.